talk you through all this.
DSA dance.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Wow, many months.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Booba.
Two, hello. Two. Chat, are you there? Are you there, chat? Chat, talk to me. Hello. A level 3 potato, thanks for the 2 months tier 1. Thank you. Level 3 potato. Moss, 29 months tier 1. Thank you very much, Moss. It is very many months. It is. And I appreciate it. Thank you. Leftward Ho. Thank you for 20 months tier 1. Leftward Ho. Thank you for that. How's it going? Let's turn this down. How's it going? How are you doing? It's Saturday Rob. That's fun, right? Saturday Rob, that's kind of a rare thing. But I missed 2 days of doing my shirt. Look at my shirt's getting so distressed. I guess it looks kind of cool though. It gives it a kind of old... It's like it really is some relic of the 80s or something like that. It's kind of cool. Yeah, I missed 2 days of the stream at the end of the week there, having to deal with cat stuff. Had to bring Momo to the vet. And she seems to be doing better. She's got a bunch of medicine. Got a bunch of treatments to get her digestive system rolling again. It was stressful. It was stressful to have to deal with. Didn't enjoy it. And was also an unexpected kind of expense there, which is never great either. But Momo seems to be doing a bit better. Hopefully she's on the mend. We love Momo, don't we? We love Momo, don't we, folks? And I wanted to, I would have ideally liked to have gotten started earlier, but because of this backlog of work I had to do, I had to record and produce an entire episode of the Insurgents podcast this morning as well. So that's what I've been doing the last couple of hours. Just put out a brand new Insurgents podcast with Luke O'Neill, author of Welcome to Hell World, and also the author of a new collection of short fiction called A Creature Wanting Form. Really good discussion, actually. Really good discussion with Luke O'Neill. I'm going to go ahead and throw that in the chat right now. And so I encourage everyone to listen to that. It's a really good podcast episode, but also if you can, give it a like. I don't do this enough with the podcast, but just going in there and clicking the like button is very helpful, actually. It's very helpful to do that. So if you can, go ahead and click that link. I'm going to have some periodic reminders throughout the stream to get people to click the link and support the podcast. It was a really good episode with Luke O'Neill. And in fact, I literally just published it while the intro was playing. That's how down to the wire it was getting here. I'm just give it a quick listen now, just to make sure I attached the right audio file on there. Just in case I didn't. Just bear with me here. Okay, bear with me. Let's see, I think I did this okay. I think I did this all right. The intro is actually very good. Hey Jordan, how's it going?
Hello Rob, I'm doing well. I'm just hanging out. How are you?
Oh, it's going well. It's going good. Thanks for asking. So you're back, obviously, from moving here. So I guess I just had a question for you, and I was just wondering, do you think that I've been doing a really good job hosting the show by myself?
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Fantastic. So you think maybe it's in the best interest for everyone if I maybe take more of the Substack subscription money and pocket that because of how important and vital I am to the voice of the show? Is that what you're saying?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well, thank
very
you.
generous.
That's very kind of you. I wasn't expecting this.
So this is really wonderful. Okay, I'm not doing this bit any longer. I'm not going to carry on with this big bit. I'm already biting off way more than I can chew here. Jordan's still not here. That was just some audio trickery that you just heard. A little bit of audio magic that works. One of the main reasons. Again, another great talk.
I even put in
think
the
you're
laugh
gonna love
track
it.
there.
I sure did. And Luke O'Neill's going to be joining the show right after this. I'm literally just making sure this all worked because I don't want to release the episode and find out I attached some bullshit to it. Should come in just a moment here. So we're fading in over the music now. I always have the hardest time with this part, especially when I'm by myself, because like Jordan is moving to LA right now. That's why I'm hosting the pod by myself. But you got to kind of manufacture a bit of sort of chit chat at the beginning.
He's gone Hollywood, huh? Finally,
He is, yeah. Hollywood, Jordan. Good. Sounds like everything's in order there. Hey, Sean, how's it going? Sounds like everything's in order. Please listen to the episode. It's a really great discussion with Luke O'Neill, Hollywood Jordan. I did make that connection in just a moment, Sean. But if you want to hear me joke around about that, you have to listen to the episode. You can click on the link in the chat. And even if you can't listen to it a little later, you know what? It really helps to just click the heart button. Click the heart button on there. Give it a like. It's really helpful. The link's in the chat. I'm going to post it one more time. And I'm going to periodically, as the stream goes on, remind people to check out the episode and to click the like button. Just imagine if this Rob solo episode of the Insurgents podcast becomes one of the most liked episodes. Just imagine how crazy that would be. I know, it'd be wild. I love it when Rob gives us a peek at the sausage. It's not. This is a family stream, all right? All right, leftward ho, indeed. This is a family stream. All right, let's keep it clean over here. Okay? Okay, so yeah, but I really do recommend people check that out. That's going to be a very good episode. Tuesday on TRRS. Tuesday evening. We got Eugene Puryear coming on. I'm going to be doing some longer streams next week as well. And we got Eugene Puryear of Breakthrough News. Going to come on the show on Tuesday. And we can talk about this ongoing situation in Niger. And like, I think he's going to be fantastic to talk to him about that, about Ukraine, imperialism, all of that good stuff. Eugene's a really brilliant guy. China, of course. Really brilliant guy. Really looking forward to talking to him on Tuesday. Eugene Puryear. Other than that, I don't really know what's going to go on today. I'm going to be here till about 6 or 7. So not a long mega stream or anything. I'll try to do at least one mega stream next week. I'll try to do a good 8 or 9 hour one next week, just for while I have the option to do it. I don't always have the option or the ability. So, we'll aim for one of those next week, but we'll do a substantial stream today. But because I was working like right down to the wire and editing this podcast and putting it together and releasing it while the theme music was playing, didn't have a ton of time to like plan out what I'm actually going to do today. I think I would like to have some lunch in a few minutes. That's one thing I'm going to do. Definitely. And I'm sure there's a number of other activities we can get up to over here. How's everyone's weekend going? How was your Friday night? How was your Friday night? I just, I spent the evening hanging out with my son. We watched the Super Mario Brothers movie again. We saw it in the theater, but we watched that again, and I slept through about an hour of it. I was really tired. I was really, really tired, and Because just like when I get stressed out, I think it's like a stress response. Like I'm already backed up on sleep and kind of exhausted. But then when I get stressed out, I was stressed out over the cat stuff and just was exhausted. So I used the opportunity of watching this movie to sleep for a good 45 minutes to an hour. Which is funny because I've seen the movie twice, but I still haven't seen the whole thing because I also fell asleep during the theatrical version as well. And maybe eventually I will see the entire movie. We'll see though. I think I slept through different points last night. I think overall I've seen the entire movie at this point. My Friday was nice. I went to a metal show. That's fun. That's very fun, Sikalufakis. Very cool. Oh, speaking of tired, I'm obviously still a little sleepy, as you can see. What else? What else did you get up to, folks? Friday night. What else you got? Anyone do anything cool? Did anyone do anything cool, or are we all elderly millennial shut-ins? I know I am an elderly millennial shut-in, obviously. We can't all be like that. Certainly someone must have done something cool, right? Someone must have. Oh man, look at me. I'm yawning like crazy already. This is not good. I'm going to get some caffeine. I got to get some caffeine in me stat. Elder Zoomers rise up. We got Elder Zoomers now. Oh man. Elder Zoomers. I stayed up late watching the Pokemon Championships. Okay. Yeah. Nice. I can't banter about that because I don't know any of the competitors that are involved in that. I hope it was good though. I had to cancel plans with my dad today because my issues are acting up, so I think I qualify as old. I think we both do, Sean. I think we both do. I think we both probably qualify as disabled as well. You know, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's some kind of internalized, latent ableism that I have. I think I have a hard time describing myself as like the D word, but like as I get older and older and my physical issues continue to haunt me, I'm kind of like, this is kind of the situation, isn't it? Like, why am I not being honest with myself about this? It's kind of weird, isn't it? Show Sheepy, we got fellow elderly millennial shut-in checking in. Very nice. Very nice. I have been making a little bit more effort to be social lately, though, doing some stuff. Went to Oshiaga. I've done a couple things this summer. Seeing people and like doing stuff and everything. I finally finished deep cleaning my car after sleeping in it for a while. It was gross under the seats, so I gutted the whole thing and shampooed the seats and carpet. That's got to feel good. That's got to feel good. I keep, in terms of cleaning, like my place, I keep just like papering over things and tidying, but like not going in depth about it. I got to do a bunch of stuff. I got a sink full of dishes here. I got floor. I got to do the floors. I got to do all kinds of stuff. I just finished up serving 2 gallons of coffee for free to people at a little market. I love talking to the people about coffee. That sounds nice. Sounds very nice. Look at me. I'm yawning up a storm here. I got to use some coffee. I got to get some coffee in me. I already had 2 cups today. Oh, you know what? I got a cold cup on the table. I'm going to go grab that right now. And I really got to make lunch in a couple minutes. I just wanted to say hello. Say hello to people. There we go. I had to move some shit I had in storage, so I'm relaxing after moving shit in the heat. There's nothing better than that relaxation, like after you do a bunch of stuff that you don't want to do, and you get to go and chill after. It just hits different, doesn't it? It hits different. Because you don't have the guilt. The guilt when you're just chilling and it doesn't feel unearned. Or it does feel unearned because you haven't been productive. Because we all have to be productive every day or else we feel bad about ourselves. So when you do something that you can kind of justify it, you have been productive and you're like, now I can just sit on my fucking ass. And it's just totally justified. Very nice. One of the little comforts of our modern world. The justified ass sit. I love a good ass sitting. Me too. Me too. Absolutely. It's a very nice feeling. I'm ass sitting right now. Yeah, I mean, I guess technically I am. This is the thing about streaming. It's kind of, you're kind of sitting, you're sitting around doing nothing and also kind of being productive at the same time. I don't know. I've got to promote this podcast episode. I'm going to promote this podcast episode before we get any further. Full ass unemployment. I'm also out of weed. That makes me sad. Those carts can go fast. I'm coming close. You know what? I'm having a bit of a panic moment right at this very moment, Sean, because I think I have one more cart left, but I'm not certain. I'm not certain whether I have one. Do I have one? I don't know. I'll have to go check my drawer when I go to make my lunch there. That's how it starts. That's right. I do have some analog weed if worst comes to worst. I've got a little analog weed to tide me over until a cart can arrive. I'm so snobby about analog weed now, though. I'm like, ugh, ugh, ugh. Okay, but here's the situation for me. Not only do I have to write a tweet to promote this podcast episode, which I don't want to do, like while we're all hanging out, I also have to make lunch. So what do we say if we start this stream off? I gotta burden this thing? Gonna get my fingers all sticky and gross? Yeah, what am I? What am I, a peasant? What am I, a farmer? That's right. What do you say we start this stream off with watching a little episode of a certain little reality TV series that we've come to enjoy on this program? I've risen through the ranks of the last couple of weeks to become Twitch's only meta react streamer of the TV series Man Tracker. What do you think we get started with that? Is there any appetite for that in the chat? I can put that on. We can have a laugh. Doing our snide, pithy commentary over Man Tracker. We can enjoy that. I can promote this podcast episode. And I can have some lunch. And then maybe afterwards we can get down to business. On this stream, men will be tracked. Yes, they will. Yes, they will. What do you say, chat? Are you into this plan? Does this sound like a tentative plan of action here? Sound off. Sound off in the comments. I'm gonna need to have a man tracker remote at some point. Well, I got Red Wizard giving a thumbs up, so that I think to me speaks for the entire chat. I think we're able to extrapolate from that chat is really excited and enthusiastic about this tentative plan here. Let's do a little man tracking. Let's do some man tracking. Everyone's favorite segment. Oh man, look at me. Look at me. I'm yawning up a storm here. This is wild. Okay. This looks good. There it is. They got tracked. I think that's kind of what we were expecting. They were not taking this shit seriously enough at all. They weren't treating with the man tracker with the respect that he deserves. And, you know, that's ultimately, we've seen that fatal mistake a number of times now. You know, when you don't take it seriously, it just leads to yet another man tracker W. It's true. I would simply not be tracked personally. Can't speak for these guys though. I would like to pivot to talking a little bit about the wildfires and this kind of climate denial cult that we referenced before. I would like to pivot to that. It's a Saturday, pretty low on viewers so far, so I'm not gonna crack the whip too much here. But if you enjoy TRRS, folks, if you enjoy this content, I'm here on my Saturday.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Vlad, thank you for the 300 friend coin. I'm here on my Saturday, trying to pull together an informative and entertaining and fun and engagement-filled episode of TRRS. Did just have this emergency vet visit, and I'm still kind of behind the 8 ball because of taking some time off for just hang out with my family and to also be extremely sick. So if you can, support TRRS, folks. Every little bit helps. $5 a month, completely free of charge with an Amazon Prime account. Help support me, the content that I create here on Twitch.tv.
You can count on me.
Help support the community. It's all very helpful. I appreciate it a lot. Chimera, thank you for the gifted sub. Thank you very much. I would like to maybe take a short break. I'm still very low energy. I'm low energy Rob, and I've had 2 coffees and a DC now, and it's still not really doing all that much. I think I may just take a short 5 minutes just to transition from man tracker content to talk about this climate business, and I think we can really get into this weird conspiratorial uh, communities that are emerging from these like climate consequences, whether it's the wildfires in Hawaii or wherever else, or it's not limited to climate even, but you can point to a number of other different things, mass shootings and police brutality, etc. I'm going to promote one more time as well, folks, the podcast episode that I just released with Luke O'Neill, which is a really good conversation with Luke O'Neill on the Insurgents podcast. Please give that a listen. But also, if you can, if you're watching right now, just hit the like button on that. It really helps to just hit the heart button, the like button on those Insurgents pod episodes. So if you can take 2 minutes to do that, I would appreciate that as well. But it's a very good episode. I really encourage everyone to get into it. And we talked about this very subject in this episode. We talked about climate and the weird conspiratorial thinking that's allowing people to deny the sort of very real reality that's right in front of their faces. I'd get these boots with fake animal prints on the bottoms, but my fake prints would be children's footprints to really confuse the man tracker. He's not child tracker or kid tracker. I don't totally understand how your adult-sized boots would be leaving child tracks. I don't know the logistics of that, but I think the strategy is sound. I just don't totally understand how that would work. You could be walking around in a normal adult-sized boot and have that leave child tracks. That's, I think, the main flaw in the logic there. So let me just take I'm going to take 5 minutes here, folks, and we'll get into this subject. It is a sound of freedom thing as well, definitely. Okay, just give me a few minutes, folks. I'll be back. NBA Hall of Fame night tonight. I can't wait for NBA season to start again. I really miss the NBA. Really looking forward to that starting up again. Even though the end of the summer is going to be very depressing. Okay, don't go anywhere. I'll be back. I'm back. Hello. Hello. Okay, what's up? Just received a text from my mom. Just one sec. Hello, Moss. Okay. I'm very low energy. Shout out to my mom. Absolutely. Shout out to my mom, indeed. Wonderful person. While we sit here and vibe out a little bit, let me just see if I can find some clips for us to look at. While we vibe out together. That's the clip that I was looking for. So I would like to spend some time talking now about, it came up during that episode of Man Tracker there, but these latest wildfires going on in Maui, and how you have a number of people whose whole personalities have been so intertwined with this kind of climate denialism that they're really just avoiding confronting the real consequences of climate change and the emergency that we're in. Even when it's right in front of their face, bending over backwards to come up with these wacky alternative explanations for what the events that are unfolding, because it's so just at odds with what they've based their entire personality around, this kind of climate denialism, or this reactionary mentality that they have. It's not just about these wildfires. We've explored this with, it's anytime any of these stories come up. There's these recent wildfires in Hawaii. There's the wildfires in Canada. The heat wave that's been going on this summer, overall trending to be the hottest summer in recorded history. Every single time now a story comes out about any of these things, people are crawling out of the woodwork, especially now on Elon Musk's Twitter. These blue check accounts
have good old
crawling out of the woodwork to come up with all these wacky alternative ideas and conspiracies to explain the obvious reality that we're all facing. It's amazing Musk becoming this he's becoming whether he likes it or not, this kind of figurehead for this kind of conspiratorial denialism, which is funny because he made his billions on being this like climate change protector, you know? I'm this climate change, we're going to revitalize the auto industry and make electric cars and have this like electric future to fight climate change. And now he's basically this arch conservative where his website is where all the widespread climate denialism and conspiracy stuff is proliferating. Kind of a funny irony there. So throw some ivermectin on those fires. I agree. Dude Zoot, that Dude Zoot. Thank you for the 7 months of tier 1. Very much appreciated. And again, if anyone wants to support the show, you are welcome to. I would appreciate it a lot. I'm kind of like experimenting with this Saturday thing. I wanted to make sure I did another stream. I said that I would be here till around 7. I'm thinking like it's like it seems like there's just less people around to hang out and watch the stream on the weekend, and maybe I should just stick with my Monday through Friday thing, which is fine. I love hanging out with all you folks, but if it stays in the kind of this area of the viewers or subs, I'll probably end up just leaving it a little bit earlier. But if anyone else wants to support this program, though, and support the work that I do on Twitch, and help me out for, you know, if you enjoy this show, you enjoy the community, please, if you can, subscribe to TRRS. Help me pay for the vet bills that, in fact, I think I might actually do like an actual GoFundMe for Momo to raise those funds. But yeah, if you want to support the show, support the content, please, if you can, subscribe. Sunday nights could be better from viewers. Yeah, I'm not getting like fucking subsidies from the fracking industry to do my podcasting and live streaming like some of these conservative guys are. Completely dependent on you, the viewer, the listener, and I love and respect each and every one of you who support this program, even the ones of you that don't as well. That is also A-okay. But if you can, subscribe to TRRS. It really does. Really does help me out a lot. Saturday rib while cleaning the house. We love it. We love it. Let's look at, this is just from 2 hours ago. So let's set the table here by just like checking out this specific news story about this latest wildfire in Hawaii and the damage that's done. And then we can get into some of this weird conspiracy stuff.
Where displaced individuals and families are coming to seek medical attention, clothes and food. I've seen a facility for injured pets, and behind me here, crucially, a place to come and report missing persons. We're told that inside that shelter there are as many as 1,000 people. I've just walked through and seen families with young children, babies, old people, young people, many people lying on stretchers covered in bandages from severe burns, and all of them now homeless and traumatized by this week's catastrophic wildfires. This was the town of Lahaina, the bustling heart of the island of Maui. Now it's ash, rubble and ruin. A smouldering grid of cinders after fires ripped through this coastal town, leaving homes as empty husks and leaving scores dead, and with the death toll still rising. In the grisly aftermath, the streets are littered with the remains of whatever couldn't make it out. Cars abandoned to the flames now form a ghostly traffic jam. As residents come to terms with the disaster, Hawaii's Attorney General announced a comprehensive review into how authorities responded to the fire after many said they were left stranded.
It is a little insensitive, the shirt choice, I agree.
The fires suddenly erupted. The lucky ones who did make it out are now slowly being allowed to return for the first time.
In this moment, we're just looking for everyone to be alive, to be safe. That's all we're trying to do. And the rest, go from there.
But there's little to find.
This is my house. This is the ash, the remains of my
Interviewing, of course, all these like white colonizer Hawaii residents. It is definitely a weird vibe, yes. Like, we absolutely should feel sympathy and fear and anxiety about what these fires represent, but like, I think we're seeing the symptom of a totally different problem here as well at the same time.
House.
Sydney Carney used to live here. The reality of the devastation she fled is now just starting to become clear.
Her black morning bikini, that's right.
More real than seeing all the pictures. I walked through my room and there's just nothing. Like, everything is gone. It's really just Lahaina town is Lahaina town. Like, that's who we are. We are the old town of Maui. And now we are not even a town.
You have a long history. You have a long history stretching
Those who
back
fled
how
the
long?
flames are
A
coming
couple
to
years?
places like this. A sports centre turned
Not the
shelter
selfie.
to wait for news from the outside.
Good Lord.
After Hawaii's worst ever disaster, how safe are their homes and how safe are their loved ones? Hundreds lie in makeshift beds as authorities and aid agencies treat the injured and hand out supplies. There I met Sonia, who got out as the wildfires raged next to her home. She only had the clothes she was wearing.
It was absolutely terrifying. The smoke was horrible. People are screaming, and when we were driving, the power lines are in the road burning. All of our friends' houses burned down too, because literally 90 or 95% of Lahaina is gone. It's burnt to the ground.
Down by the boatyard, Maui locals are gathering supplies for those still stuck.
It's nice to see because
We had unprecedented flooding here last week that left many people homeless. I don't want to think what the reactionary conspiracy theorist contingent has been saying about it. I mean, we're seeing it all over, right? Not only just the horrific climate consequences, but this fucked up reactionary response to it. And this, again, it's something that I talked about with Luke O'Neill on the podcast today, how, like, we tell ourselves when it comes to climate or a lot of these things, like, when people really see the consequences, when the contradictions are heightened, when all of these things are on full display, they'll start to understand the truth and they'll start to be more amenable to, and it's like, not really, actually. It turns out, just like any cult, it's that when prophecy fails thing, and no matter how much evidence that the denialism about this that they've immersed themselves in, denialism that's being directly funded by the oil and gas industry, the fracking industry, funding all these right-wing media outlets that fuel all this shit. And the more the consequences of that are right in their face, the more they're doubling and tripling down on the denialism. And I think that's a really interesting kind of phenomenon.
they didn't got much, but they're giving to everybody around them.
I'm sorry.
No, it's amazing. The word aloha does not know bounds. Aloha knows no bounds, and I'm so proud to live on Maui. People are going to make it. We're going to get through this.
The coast, once the symbol of this tourist idyll, is now a path to get aid to those still battling the flames raging across Hawaii.
Well, earlier Siobhan spoke to Dr. Guy Sugino, who's been treating the survivors of the fires.
What kind of burns, what are we seeing here?
A lot of patients, or a lot of the people coming over here had a lot of injuries from the embers, and just running on the hot sidewalk, they got second-degree burns on their feet, some third-degree burns that were being treated here.
That's because that's how desperate they were to get out?
They had a hard time coming out. A lot of people were swollen from standing in the cold water. They jumped into the ocean to get away from the fire, and
so people were having to, such was the speed of the fire, having to leave their house and jump into the sea. What have they been telling you?
It would happen so fast, there was no time to react. By the time they found out that the fire was coming close to them, it was already there. There was no time for any emergency alerts, or it just was running right through the whole town.
And you're a Maui native.
Right.
Have you ever known anything like this before?
I've never seen anything like this. I mean, we've had hurricanes, We've had other fires that have blocked the highways, but not to the level or this extent of injury and loss. And that's where the issue is. There's so much loss.
And everything we're hearing from the people that we've spoken to today, it's still a very dire, acute situation out there. There are people still.
There's still a lot of people out there that are having access issues, and they don't have any medications. They have injuries that have not been addressed. I mean, a lot of different things because they couldn't escape. People will get through this, but it's going to take a long time.
Because of what these people have experienced.
Oh, I don't think anybody can experience this except being in a war, because it's just, you lose everything, right? And there's nothing to go back to. So just that loss is going to be significant.
So we can and we should spend some time
tour through the historic town,
talking a little bit about like why these
on the Hawaiian island of Maui looks like on
issues are getting worse. Whoa, what the fuck's that? What is this? What is this sound?
Words alone don't really do the job of describing just how badly Maui has burned.
Where is this? Okay. So I think it's worthwhile to take a bit of time to like explore just the causes for the ways that these wildfires are becoming more common in Hawaii and elsewhere, before we really dive into the weird conspiracy shit. And this article is going to do that.
Tuesday night, as deadly wildfires fanned by hurricane winds tore through the historic town.
Take a look at this.
It's insane when you can feel the heat from this far away.
This video, filmed by local resident Richard Conan, shows the buildings in his neighborhood engulfed in flames.
People were walking around talking about losing their homes and not knowing where to go and trying to figure out what to do because there wasn't any kind of coordination. Cell phones had quit working. We couldn't find out from anyone or call anyone.
And now, this is what's left. The Lahaina fire is one of 4 that have scorched Maui this week, killing dozens of people and forcing thousands to flee their homes. As firefighters contained the blaze, the scale of the devastation became clear. Some 1,000 structures are thought to have been destroyed as the fire swept through Lahaina.
Yeah,
it's extraordinary. It is tragically gone.
A good point as well. Goth Engel Center from a few moments ago. So cool to have all the media showing pure human suffering without any resolution. No analysis of how this happened or where to go from here. It's just, look how bad it is. Maybe you're next. That's very true and very, like, I think, in keeping with how this kind of sensationalized entertainment version of the news that we do get in our like Verhoeven world that we lives in. I do think this piece will get a little bit into exactly like why this stuff is happening and why climate change is a main culprit in explaining why these wildfires, because as we know, folks, there's always been wildfires. It's not this new phenomenon, but the frequency, the intensity, the amount of destruction and like loss of life that's happening, that is something that's increasing exponentially because of climate change, because of drought, because of these invasive species in Hawaii, which we're going to get into as well. Like we need to explore all this, but then we're going to look into the ways that reactionaries and conservative weirdos are completely pretending that like none of these things are real because they've been told, that's all they've been told for decades and decades.
We probably have well over 1,000 buildings that have been destroyed. Many hundreds of families have been displaced.
Wall Street Journal reporter Alicia A. Caldwell tried to enter Lahaina on Thursday, but her access was restricted.
For much of the day, as has been the case in the past few days, Lahaina is closed. It's closed to anybody who doesn't live there. Buses carrying evacuees from Lahaina town have been leaving the historic area all day. Traffic into the area is restricted to only emergency personnel and those rescue workers who are moving into the area to try to establish power, recover those who have died, and rescue those who are still missing.
Disruptions to phone and internet services have made it difficult to determine the number of people still missing. Conan left Lahaina, but many residents chose to stay.
grabbed our stuff, whatever we could get, gave all the water I brought back with me to the people that weren't coming, weren't leaving, that were going to stay.
The governor of Hawaii called the fires the worst natural disaster in the state's history and said it would take years and billions of dollars to rebuild. President Biden has declared a major disaster in the state and vowed federal assistance to those in need.
Okay, this seems good too. We could just read this article, but I think this is probably better just to look at
Let's
this.
bring in Dr. Eric Kennedy. He's an associate professor of disaster and emergency management at New York University in Toronto. So, Doctor, we heard.
And people say too, it's like, I have a lot of mistrust of mainstream media, corporate media, and all this stuff. And I think that's another thing that fuels this kind of radicalization and this kind of conspiratorial thinking too, right? They're like, why do you trust them? It's mainstream media. They're saying climate change. It must be something else. It speaks to the level of mistrust that people have in these big media institutions, which is completely valid. That's a completely valid response when you see over and over, especially when it comes to like foreign policy issues, in particular. But these big media corporations, lying on behalf of the government, obfuscating things, being part of this kind of system of inventing reality. So when they start talking about climate change, people say like, well, why do you believe that? They know what's going on. And the reason that I do believe it is because none of these TV stations or corporate media outlets, even if they're reporting on climate change and the science of it, they're not advocating for any real change to the status quo in the way that we organize our society or our economy. And, when you're a socialist, a Marxist, you understand the way that our system, the way that capitalism has contributed to this like global destruction. And that's the link that corporate media is not going to make. So they might bring on climate scientists. They might talk about the ways that climate is exacerbating all of these things. But it's all in service of still maintaining the status quo, talking about the problem while maintaining the status quo, and talking about personal things that you can do, personal decisions and lifestyle choices that you can make to stop climate change, who to vote for. You can vote for this person or that person. You can support these different NGOs or charities. What you can't do, though, is like violently confront this like system, this economic system that we're living under, which we know for certain is just completely decimating the planet and these biospheres. That's the difference, though. I'm extremely mistrustful of mainstream media. And when they talk about climate change, that doesn't mean that the scientists are fake or that climate science isn't real because they're talking about it. But as we know, the where the corporate media lies come in is their inability to link this to any kind of like critique of our economic or political systems or our culture. That's what they don't do. And that's why it's just like, it's a silly thing, I think, to become so twisted up in this hatred of mainstream media, which again, entirely justified. It's something that I completely agree with. But then to just assume that like everything that the mainstream media ever talks about, up to and including climate change, is just fake or some fake conspiracy. That's not true, obviously. And I think this piece is going to get into the actual science of like why these wildfires, such as these ones in Maui, are getting so much worse. Yeah, absolutely, Dave. We know what recovery means after Katrina. Nothing at all ends up being cut up and sold off in parcels to developers. I mean, that's the primary thing, right? We're going to see disaster capitalism unfolding in all these places. Like there's no crisis that's not ultimately used as an excuse to funnel wealth upwards. And this is going to be no different. And that's the thing that corporate media is going to be totally complicit in. Right? It doesn't mean the climate science is fake, but they are covering up the economic realities that are underpinning all these things.
Heard from the officials, we've heard the heartbreak from the people on the ground. I want to talk to you from an academic perspective. What are your takeaways?
Yeah, unfortunately, this fire is a tragic reminder of the potential of wildfire to affect almost everywhere. We've seen that through the smoke this summer. We've seen that with past fires like the Marshall Fire in Colorado, affecting places that we might not stereotypically think about as prone to wildfire. Unfortunately, wildfire touches us all, and the consequences here have been devastating, as we've seen.
But yeah. I was going to say two things. When you think of Hawaii, you do not think of drought conditions, right? It's so lush and humid, but that's part of what they were dealing with. And just because we got somebody from Toronto, I worked up in Toronto, and one of the things that I don't recall really covering were wildfires.
And all
but
the Canadian
here we
fires
are.
now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this brings me to a clear shift, Doctor, and obviously climate change.
A few more
is a
carbon
factor.
credits, exactly.
But in what ways is climate
They'll
change a
use
factor?
paper
Depending on where
straws.
you are.
Yeah.
And by the way, all this shit as well, that also ends up contributing to this radicalizing effect. Like, people are aware when these like completely useless, not useless, but meaningless in the scope of the crisis that we're in, gestures such as replacing plastic straws with paper straws. Yeah, that might cut down on the amount of plastic that we're dumping in the fucking ocean every year by a fraction of a percent. Is it going to do anything meaningfully to contribute to the slowing down of the warming of the planet? No, it's not. And we understand that. And conservatives and reactionaries understand that as well. And that's why they see the government doing these like pitiful gestures, and that just ends up radicalizing them in the wrong direction as well. Any of this like personal lifestyle choice shit, I mean, it's useless. Yeah, we're getting into the Teslas or the EV, the EV F-150s, exactly. Yeah. These are the things you can do to make a difference. It won't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. We need a drastic, historic, generational investment into this huge shift in our whole way of life. And barring that, none of these little gestures, even if they might make you feel better, they may have to give you a sense of sort of personal catharsis or whatever. It make you feel good about yourself to have a electric F-150 instead of a fucking gas guzzling SUV or something like that. Ultimately, though, it's not actually doing anything to meaningfully attack the problem. Yet 1 year of the world's military budgets, for sure. Are the way combating climate change is being done through capitalist mechanisms, which imposes the financial burden on the public rather than those responsible. So people just see green and see it as some tax scam or way to make money. And that's not even wrong, right? It's not even wrong for them to think that. When they see even people in rural areas are like shamed for driving a car around, when it's like, they're like, there's no infrastructure for me to get around. There's no rail or transit or any other way for me to fucking get around, because we've organized all our society around car ownership and destroyed that ability at every turn. And then, they see they have to pay more at the gas pump. They see they have to get shamed for using vehicles, but it's like, well, no, and then they become reactionary against the very idea, and it's almost understandable.
Plays a huge role, and it's one of several causes that multiplies together to give us the catastrophic fires that we see today. In the case of Hawaii and other places that have both wet and dry periods, we can see that lead to a loading up in fuels, these grasses that folks have been talking about that are not native to the area, but have had a chance during the wet times to grow significantly and then be ready to burn when they're dry. But climate can have a number of impacts on fire regimes, as we would call them. It can make it drier, less humid, windier, even potentially lead to more lightning strikes. And these kinds of conditions can create catastrophic fires.
Doctor, you know about the Santa Ana winds in California, right? So I've covered so many wildfires, and what was so different for me in hearing about what's happening in Hawaii is apparently there was this hurricane off the coast of Maui.
Net zero by 2050.
Right, not even
Exactly.
impacting the island. But the winds from the hurricane were what was driving onto the island of Maui and fueling what has been this devastating fire. Is this uncommon?
Unfortunately, these kinds of extreme wind events are at the root of many fire tragedies. When you have this kind of wind involved, it drives the fire behavior quite aggressively and makes it very, very difficult to fight the blaze. There's, in many cases, almost nothing that firefighters can do during an extreme wind event with these kinds of adverse conditions to stop the fire. And so we need to think about a more comprehensive suite of solutions to managing our wildfire problems.
Like what?
So part of this is reducing the potential for ignition, right? Figuring out the ways that these fires are starting and making sure that those don't happen. We also need to get our communities ready for when fire events do occur. designing them in a way that fires can come through and do less damage, that people have more routes for safe evacuation, and that the buildings are protected with even minor modifications to make it less likely for them to burn down.
You know, when I started working here, we would talk about fire season in California,
right?
Which then increasingly was extended, and now there isn't a season.
It seems like it's all year
round.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, you talk about infrastructure and the way we rebuild. Maui will have to be rebuilt, and one of the problems with Maui is people could not get out when they realized there was a problem. And we talked earlier about the emergency system. But what about the personnel? You know, often when we talk about fighting fires, it's sort of a crisis situation. Personnel are drawn in from everywhere. But do you foresee, you know, sort of always on standby, trained professionals to deal with fires, because there isn't a single fire season anymore?
Why don't we privatize? Here's a great idea. Why don't we privatize? We got to cut the red tape around any of this public firefighting socialism nonsense. Why don't we privatize that? Have an elite force of corporate-owned and trained fire force. You can call it something powerful sounding like that. Have them ready to go at a moment's notice to protect anyone that is willing to pay the right price. And it's going to make sure that they protect the people that need to be protected, while everyone else, it's like whatever happens. But the really important, powerful people, the powerful people, the Hollywood celebs and various like business people that own property on the island, the tourists in the resorts, to protect them and make it as efficient as possible. Yeah, and then you make those shares public, and you can invest in the private fire force and make a little money on the side if you're a shareholder. And then the worse the fires get, the better that is for your bottom line. Huh? Follow me for more money making and investment tips. That's my main thing that I like to focus on, as you know.
Yeah, that's certainly a stressor that comes with climate change and with these conditions around the globe. It makes it harder to perhaps borrow personnel from country to country like we sometimes see when every country's fire season is expanding. And to be clear, we do need strong firefighting capacity, but we also need to pay attention to the fact that sometimes we just don't have the time or ability to intervene when these fires arrive. We need to design the communities and make
there
the
we go, SV Harkin. That's what we're talking
building
about.
Back or in our own communities right now that will make them more resilient to the embers and to the fire that's coming through.
Yeah, and you can certainly see when you see some of the aerial shots, David, that there would be buildings that have been reduced to ash.
Better yet, make fire force a branch of the military so we can have military contractors make more money. Now we're talking. Now we're cooking.
And then across from the parking lot, building not untouched completely, or if it was touched, it didn't burn down.
I got to say, it's unforgivable, though, that there was no warning. I mean, they have these outdoor warning siren systems. And, Doc, you talk about what communities can do. Hawaii did it, and it failed. It failed, according to eyewitness reports and what government leaders are starting to acknowledge. So,
Dr. Eric Kennedy, thank you.
And I want to talk just specifically about this invasive grass phenomenon as well. This little Vox clip, and maybe just dig into that a little bit more.
This week, wildfires have ripped through the island of Maui. Strong winds from a hurricane far offshore have helped fuel the fast-moving blazes, but there could be another culprit behind Hawaii's wildfires. Grass. Specifically, guinea grass. In the mid-1800s, non-native Hawaiians brought it to the islands to feed their cattle, and in the decades since, it's taken over, especially in abandoned sugar plantations like this one. After rainfall, guinea grass grows incredibly fast. The plant can grow as quickly as 6 inches per day and ultimately reach a height of 10 feet. And during droughts, the dry stalks turn it into fuel for what has become one of the deadliest wildfires in Hawaii's history. This week, wildfires have...
See, and this is kind of what we're talking about, right? You see exactly why these things are happening, drought, hurricane level winds, this dryness leading to these fires starting and spreading more quickly, or in this case, this very specific, you see, it's climate change, which is caused by capitalism. It's colonialism, right? Colonialism here in this case in Hawaii is directly a large contributor to it. It's like you're interviewing colonizers to talk about how they lost their property, and the link is right there as well. It's not just capitalism, but colonialism has destroyed not destroyed, but completely changed the ecosystem of the island and makes these things more, way more severe. You know, the answers are right there. The answers are really right there in front of people, whether they want to accept them or not. And as we're seeing, people do not want to accept them. They do not. And so we talked about like the actual science of it. And I had wanted to get into exactly what these weird reactionaries are saying now. Again, this shit is not hard to understand. It's not hard to understand. I'm not a climate scientist, and I can still wrap my mind around like how climate change is contributing to these kinds of things. It's not that hard to get. But apparently for some people who have devoted their entire personality to denying the science of climate change because they consume news that's funded by the fossil fuel industry, the oil and gas industry, the fracking industry, etc. They've been consuming news funded by these kinds of corporations now for decades, who have put a specific plan in place to spread disinformation about this and to completely paralyze us from acknowledging it at all. People have spent their whole lives immersed in this kind of media, and then this is the result. And that's the funniest thing to me, is that these people who, again, get all their news from basically the PR wing of the oil and gas industry and the fracking industry are the ones that are like, no, I'm the real free thinker. I'm not one of these liberals here. I'm the real free thinker. I understand the real truth behind this because I'm not one of these brainwashed sheep, when they're literally so brainwashed, their cognitive dissonance is so strong that they can't look at these big climate change consequences happening and think for a second, perhaps I've been led astray here. Perhaps I'm wrong here. No, I'm a free thinking individual. I consume all this news literally paid for entirely by the oil and gas industry that has so warped my brain that I'm reaching to this like conspiracy world explanation. But yeah, I'm the free thinking, independent minded individual. Not like one of these brainwashed sheep out there. Hello, Larry.
Maybe hot, yeah, watch out there. Just watch out, hot maybe.
Wow. Here's the comment is, everything is burnt but the trees, but don't point that out or you're a conspiracy theorist. And if you look for these wildfires, it's almost 50-50 from what I was looking, of people that are pointing out images that they say disprove the entire idea versus actual like news stories about this, which is again hilarious and ironic given Musk's whole marketing campaign as being this like green energy, liberal kind of industrialist. And now Twitter is like home to the most, conspiratorial, weird right-wing climate denialism. Also, a lot of oil and gas facilities fund local organizations like city events, sports leagues, banquets, etc. I mean, Gothengo Center, just look at the number it's done on people in Alberta is a great example. Like all these people walking around with I love oil and gas t-shirts and stuff like that. This industry which has ruthlessly exploited the land for their own profits and their own benefit. Who are screwing people over by taking away people's jobs and saving as many billions of dollars as possible so they can go in the pockets of their shareholders in Texas or Saudi Arabia or wherever the fuck it is. And these people are still wandering around wearing like oil and gas t-shirts and how they've made this a big part of their identity, supporting the oil and gas industry. It is depressing. It is really, really depressing. I'm a free thinker. All my free thoughts just happen to be the same as the U.S. State Department and the Chamber of Commerce. That's right. You have the two different sides, both liberals and reactionaries, who are blaming the other ones and saying they're the brainwashed sheep. Meanwhile, they're both just regurgitating talking points about different industries. The liberals believe in the climate scientists. They believe in the climate science, but then they back the fucking State Department and the CIA on every single horrific military decision that America makes. Wildfires can't melt palm trees. That's right. Yeah. A lot of people in this society are deeply allergic to the thought that they could, even in the most minuscule way, be at fault for anything, and are therefore obligated to change their behavior. Absolutely. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? People are just are so addicted to this lifestyle of getting whatever we want whenever we want it. And any challenge to that is just not going to be acceptable to them. No matter how much evidence piles up that shows that we do need to readjust our lifestyles. And again, I'm not one of these degrowth guys either. I think people should, we need to keep the lights on for people. We need to maintain a high standard of living. We need to deliver that to everybody. There needs to be degrowth in capitalist industry, in the military industrial complex, and these things. That's where the degrowth needs to happen. You know, we do need to make a change to our incredibly cynical consumerist lifestyle, but I still think we need to be able to maintain a high standard of living for everybody. Yeah, and we can reduce a lot of pointless consumption. Even all the bullshit about you're growing fruit and the whole banana argument, right? We need bananas wherever we want. It's we can't have this situation where you have a fruit growing in South America or the Caribbean. It's being bananas are one thing, but canned peaches or whatever, or canned tangerines or whatever it is, being grown in Latin America, sent on a boat to Thailand to be put in a can, and then sent on another boat back to North America to be consumed, to be sold and purchased and consumed. It's just ludicrous. You just can't continue going about those things. We just can't. We can't do that. So, and that's not degrowth. That's just acknowledging a completely wasteful and incoherent economic system. And less meat as well. Yeah, it's that's the reality also. I mean, so much of the Amazon is cut down to make room for cattle ranchers to feed cattle to provide people with beef. I mean, it's just we do need to make a change. No matter what people want to admit, whether they want to admit it or not. And guess what? You go to A&W and have a Beyond Burger. It's delicious. It's fantastic. You know, I would be happy to continue to eat that. But we can't just make it a lifestyle choice. You can choose to do that or the other. No, there does need to be a concerted effort to completely change some of these industries. I'll find more of this conspiracy shit. Look, not even the conspiracy stuff, but look at the way that the media is covering it. We saw a little bit of this in some of those clips, but this is really remarkable. From Kellen Browning of the New York Times. This is so on the nose. On Friday, I'm going to put my somber voice, my somber newscaster voice. And again, no wonder people don't trust the liberal media or establishment media. On Friday, Alicia Stratton searched desperately through the wreckage of her Lahaina home for the Rolex watch her parents gave her when she graduated college. Suddenly, her fiancé pulled it from the ashes. "You found it," she said, choking up. It was damaged, but still legible. That's what the New York Times is choosing to focus on in these moments. Why can't I look at the picture? I don't know. It's a good question. Why can't I? Couldn't tell you. But yes, we're focusing on this white colonizers lost Rolex. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that. So much fake value destroyed. That's right. Yeah. But that's the amazing thing, right? You see like how Hawaii, being this like settler colony of the United States, has directly contributed to the suffering of like indigenous people on Hawaii for a very long time now. They've contributed to like the complete changing of the ecology of the island and these wildfires happening in the first place. And then when these kind of climate consequences emerge, our media is like, look at these poor colonizers. They've lost everything. They've lost everything. Isn't this tragic? There's really something quite on the nose about that, isn't there? So I guess that's one thing that we're looking at right now. We're seeing the sort of liberal reaction versus the conservative reaction. Los Angeles Sheriff's Deputy Elda Perico believes that fires in Hawaii are being set intentionally by directed energy weapons, secretly being used by the government, as in like space lasers. Los Angeles Sheriff's Deputy. This portal opens for about 2 weeks every year, with the strongest energy happening on August 8th. And wouldn't you know it, many of their deliberate fires created by DEWS the last few years all started in this 2-week window. The portal actually opened on July 28th and stays open for more than 2 whole weeks until August 12th. However, August 8th is when it's at its peak. On this day, the portal is said to have incredibly strong vibrations of energy flowing through the physical and spiritual worlds. DEWS, so that's directed energy weapons, like this Lockheed Martin. And they point to the military-industrial complex. They point to the military-industrial complex, but instead of making the very, very real connection between the role that the military-industrial complex plays in climate change, which exacerbates heat waves and other climate consequences, including forest fires, they're like, no, it's the military-industrial complex is using these like directed energy weapons to start these fires. It's amazing how they're right there. They're even getting some of the culprits right, but then they can't fucking grasp the reality of it. And they're reaching into this bizarre science fiction conspiratorial world. Maui attacked and dude today is the guy with the directed energy weapons. Boats on fire, individual houses being torched, yet no shrub or trees. I mean, I think a lot of shrubs and trees are being burned, but they've fixated on a lot of these still standing trees in the wreckage of this. Same MO, same profile as the other DEW fires in California and beyond. And it's pointing to this this is where she's getting her info from some wacky crystal lady on Instagram, 92K followers. And that's, as much as we talk about Twitter and Elon Musk being this hive of disinformation and these far-right beliefs, you see Facebook and Instagram and all these other social media companies are deeply implicated that as well. Yeah, I think this is the exact point we're getting at here, Barfcast. The Rolex Lib and the Portal Lunatics are embodiments of the two political options in the U.S., essentially. This is the two options. If you're in America, these are the two paths you can choose. That's what American democracy is. Yeah, the Crystal Mommies have all the inside info on this, absolutely. They're saying other cases of trees burning look the same. Yeah, and there's trees and shrubs that are still standing for like a number of reasons. Like you can see that on this. Where is it? This. Like this is the thing that they're pointing out: the trees, the unburned trees. Don't point that out to your conspiracy theorist. There is a community note that says some plants are able to survive wildfires due to a layer of thermal insulation provided by their bark, dead leaves, or moist tissues. Like there is an explanation on this. The duality of America. It's exactly. And again, it's not just this like small niche community, right? We like to think that sometimes. It makes us feel a little bit better. Perhaps these like wacky conspiracy theorists are just this isolated sect that don't have any impact. And another thing reactionaries say is, look at all these like social media companies. They're all run by these liberals. They're promoting these climate change myths, and they want to destroy capitalism, and they want to destroy white people, whatever it is. And then meanwhile, here you have like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, like we were just talking about, and YouTube, not only promoting these like viewpoints, but profiting off them immensely. Tim Pool, one of the most popular YouTubers, as depressing and humiliating as I find that, that's true. And YouTube tries to like take this stance of being having some kind of like moral framework that they operate under, but some of their most popular creators are engaging in this very thing. Millions of people watch this shit. Tim Pool.
Pollution.
Oh, you can call it whatever you want, but
Yeah,
my
right.
attitude is, look, we are not on good terms with China right now. I mean, we can pretend, oh no, trade's going on, everything's fine. No, come on. They want Taiwan. They're building up their military. There's a chance for escalation, a chance for conflict. They want the South China Sea. And then they've got ships with Russia coming near the Aleutians, coming near U.S. territory, going near Hawaii, and then they're pulling off something like this. So, look, how hard is it to start a fire? It's ridiculously easy to start a fire. And they can fire lasers? Okay.
It's a little challenging to get the fire to spread, but there were hurricane level. It said it was like hurricane level winds, or there's
I don't
heavy high winds.
So they're saying
if they can start 50 fires all at once with the sequence of satellites doing high burst, high energy lasers, then getting fire to spread isn't really the issue, because you make.
Well, this NF almost said sire to Fred. You think I didn't notice that, Tim? I noticed, motherfucker. Yeah, South China. That's right. They want the South China Sea. That's how devious they are. It's true. Evil.
The fire instantly in a bunch of different places.
And they can monitor the weather in Hawaii. I mean, you could just Google that. Like what I was reading from the National Guardsman who's making a statement was that, there's low humidity and high wind, so that's perfect conditions for wildfires to spread, which means any arson fires would also spread as quickly. Like China is perfectly able to say, like, this happens to be a dangerous period for fire in Hawaii.
You see the element of truth. They're rushing right up against it. They're acknowledging all the ways, the high winds and the droughts, the way these things happen. And that's why China is using these things to start these fires and destroy. And it's like, like, Jesus Christ, they get right up to the fucking point and then take it off in this totally wacky direction. And again, YouTube profits from this. Millions of young, impressionable people watch this shit.
Perhaps now, if they were to do something. There was also a Chinese balloon observed above international waters near Hawaii in February 2022.
Wow. Right.
Yeah. So it does seem like, obviously,
they were scoping it out with the balloon before the laser attack.
And
remember when Marjorie Taylor Greene argued that there were like space lasers that could start fires?
Maybe she was right.
I think it's really funny because they claim she said Jewish space lasers.
She's got this motherfucker. And listen, not to go off on a tangent on this, you'd think there would be, like, I saw that study that was going out about trans people lately, about like how there's this, it's extremely, extremely rare for like trans people to like regret transitioning. There's like 5 fucking detransitioners in the media that these conservative guys trot out over and over and over to promote this idea that like kids or whoever are being mutilated by people with no consent and they regret it. Extremely rare. Extremely rare. You'd think that they could find one other motherfucker to talk about this than this obviously wacky person who is not even a detransitioner, but someone who got plastic surgery to look like a K-pop star. And now this has become a conservative media influencer. This obvious fucking con artist and weird scammy person. You'd think you could find at least one other person with maybe a little bit of credibility. Like this guy, really? Really? If you're going to promote this idea, this false idea, which we can look at the numbers and the stats, this false idea that trans kids are being mutilated against their will and come to regret it. Extremely, extremely rare. But you'd think you could find one detransitioner that could like actually have some credibility in this, and you would have to lean on this fucking guy. This fake trans Korean person. Like, are you kidding me? This is one of the most popular news shows on YouTube. Again, folks, I don't want to be consumed by jealousy and anger. You know, I don't want to. I'm proud to be able to do this program. I'm proud to make a small living from doing this program. You know what? I think it's one of the most things I'm most proud of in my entire life. But the fucking idea that Tim Pool is a multi-millionaire from doing this show, and this is one of the most watched news programs on YouTube, and like this is the person that you're getting your info from about the Chinese space lasers that are starting these wildfires. This fucking weird freak. So, like, are you kidding me? It's so depressing. It is so depressing, folks. You know, I'm here on my Saturday trying to make my little number go up to 35. I'm at 6 out of 35 subs to hopefully put a dent into my like cat's vet bills and my upcoming bills that I have to pay. And Tim Pool is like this multi-millionaire with a whole like compound that all his dumbass friends live on. And this is the show that they put on that millions of people watch apparently. Sean, that's the annoying thing. I don't even want the Tim Pool numbers. I don't need the Tim Pool numbers. I don't need to be a multimillionaire from this. I have no interest in that. I don't even know what I would do with that. I would like to have fucking 25% of the numbers. You know? That would be nice. Just a small amount of the numbers. This is what people are watching now. We don't need you going the other way. It's okay. Even if I wanted to do a why I left the left thing and try and become one of these conservative guys, I just couldn't do it. I would not be able to. I would not be able to. And this is what gets put to the top of the page. Yeah, if you go to YouTube in a private tab. Absolutely. Amazing. This is who you need to go to for all your climate change knowledge. These fucking people who even acknowledge the very real phenomena that exist that like contribute to these wildfires and different consequences, and then they come right up to the point of that, and then they're like, and that's why it's caused by a Chinese space laser. And this guy's like, yep. And YouTube is like, here's $1 million, sir. Here's your $1 million and your house. Is there anything else we can do for you? It's incredibly depressing, folks. It's incredibly depressing.
Funny because they claim she said Jewish space lasers when she mentioned like Rothschild's bank was providing funding for certain technology or whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't know about any of that. But I can tell you that we have video of lasers being fired from satellites. Their argument came from a pollution monitoring satellite, but lasers did come from this satellite. Now, I don't know the capabilities of this, but...
Yeah, you don't know the capabilities of it, Tim, because this is total bullshit and stupid. Because one laser has come from one satellite, therefore, yeah, that's what must have... And I don't know the capabilities of it. Yeah, we know, Tim. We know you don't know the capabilities of it. So what is this? What is this segment then? You just said you don't know the capabilities, and you're simultaneously suggesting that it is possible for a Chinese space laser to start a wildfire in Hawaii. You just admitted that you don't know what you're talking about, sir. If you watched my show, you'd know I never meant that. Of course, it's all taken out of context, you see. It's all taken out of context. Folks, by the way, if you want to help support this show and make my number go up and help me make a small living from doing a news program that does not actively make the world worse, if you can, please subscribe to TRRS. I don't get Tim Pool money, and like I said, I don't want it. I don't want Tim Pool money. If someone came around, if some Roger Waters, whoever came around and offered me, maybe I would think about that. But like, you know.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Number goes up.
Cauldron of Bats, thank you. Thank you very much for the 8 months, tier 1. So I don't think I'm going to get those numbers, and I'm fine with that. I don't need to get Tim Pool numbers or Hassan numbers or Chapo Trap House numbers. As nice as it would be, I don't think it's ever going to materialize. But if you do want to support this program and let me make a small living from doing my non-insane news program, please subscribe like Cauldron of Bats just did. It's $5 per month. It's completely free of charge with an Amazon Prime account. Get all the tiny images, support the work that I do, join the community, support the community, join Twitch's only two-dimensional triangle-shaped trickle-down clout and friendship access tiered reward system. It's the only such system that exists right here on Twitch. I'm very proud to do this show and be part of this show and to have the support of this community. If you can, please make the number go up by subscribing to this show or gifting subs or any whatever other the number of other ways that you can support this program. Just you wait, when the friendship triangle rises, will be 200k Andrews. I would be happy. I would be happy with that. I'm not holding out a lot of hope that it's going to materialize to that extent. That's okay. That's all right. If it could grow just a little tiny bit more, that would be, that would be okay. I wouldn't complain about that. You need a yes man sidekick, absolutely.
But I'm not going to believe them, right? I'm not going to believe China's like, we're looking for pollution in Hawaii.
Well, and they...
Pollution.
Fucking dumbass. Jesus. Okay, Ollie Lennon actually changed the name of the book. It used to be called Detransition, a Memoir. And the book has been changed to Gender Madness, as Pim Tool News here points out. Presumably because people pointed out that pretending to be Korean for Instagram clout doesn't make you trans. Very true. Very true. But this is definitely when you want news about climate change or the role that the military-industrial complex is playing in exacerbating these kinds of wildfires and other things, this is definitely the person you want to go to. Gender hijinks. What did he even do? Detransition from trying to be Korean. And when everyone called out his fucking weirdness, he got upset and went on a villain arc. Yeah, that's right. I think that's exactly what happened. He got called out for pretending to be Korean. And then because he, like many other people have realized, you can become this massive conservative media influencer just by going out and repeating these talking points, went out and do that. And then rather than being like, no, this person's weird and doesn't give us a lot of credibility, people like Tim Pool are like, oh yeah, come on in. Come on in. I'd love to hear from you.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Baldwin, thank you. 11 months of Prime from Baldwin's Ghost. Very much appreciated, Baldwin's Ghost. Thank you for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh, here's one of the other videos I was talking about here as well. I was trying to find this one.
So today we're going to give a little update on the Hawaiian fires. Now I want you to look at this footage, and this sure doesn't look like a fire to me. It looks like
a fire to me.
Exploded or something went off. Now what's interesting is certain things are still standing while other things are not.
It
now,
does indeed look like a fire to me personally.
Interesting. What they don't talk about is in January how they had in Maui a smart city conference to turn Maui into an entire smart island, changing everything to electric, renewables, solar panels, and pushing everybody into electric vehicles. 15-minute smart cities. So now what's also interesting is
he's turned it into the 15-minute city thing.
Is hosting the Digital Government Summit utilizing AI to govern the island. It's almost like they're resetting something to start rebuilding for this in which they're trying to push. Now, when we look at all the climate change narrative that they're going to try to push, but they're not going to talk about the Weather Modification Act of 1976. I highly recommend everybody look into this act, because who is involved in the weather modification activities? Department of Agriculture, Department of Defense, Department of Interior, EPA, and NASA. So if they're modifying the weather, then could they have caused this event? So if we see that the Department of Defense and other factions are responsible for modifying the weather, well then if we look at direct energy weapons, we can maybe see how this can all relate to this event.
Cool. Very cool. Exactly. Well, it's becoming one big giant conspiracy conglomeration. This is a galaxy brain, motherfucker. It's very true. Very true. You just needed to bring Soros in there, I think. And Soros is on the horizon of all those things. You might as well give him a mention as well. You know? You got to give him a mention. I'm just wondering if there's more of these now. So the military did it. I thought they liked the military. Well, not the woke they, them, Biden military, though. That's the problem. Right? It used to be about like good things, protecting freedom and democracy and all that kind of stuff. But now the woke Brandon, they, them army is using the weather modification system and directed energy weapons. This guy didn't do the China route. They can't quite decide whether it's coming from the Chinese or it's coming from the woke they them faction of the United States military. But now that Brandon is in charge, this is what he's putting the military into, and he's using it for these nefarious purposes. I'll only consider a conspiracy that blames Bezos because he lives on Maui, I believe, and add Oprah. They want the island for themselves during the Civil War. Or yeah, to build like climate bunkers on. Zuckerberg as well. I don't think Zuckerberg is on Maui, but he has property in Hawaii where he's like forced indigenous Hawaiians off their land at the same time for it. But that's the thing. There's no conspiracy. The conspiracy is right out in the open. This is what we always brush up against in these things. And like, yeah, you're absolutely right. The rich and powerful colonizers and capitalists that have property on this island are indeed going to, and industrial interests and the military industrial complex are going to use these kinds of disasters to implement disaster capitalism, to like force average people out so they can take more of the land for themselves, to force austerity, like all of these things, like buying up the burned land and then developing on there and making billions from it, and or betting on betting on the futures of where these disasters happen. Yes, they are going to use this disaster to increase their own wealth and power. That's not like, you don't need to bend over backwards to invent this crazy science fiction conspiracy to talk about this. This is like a basic part of our economic system and settler colonialism. Right? We see settler colonialism having contributed to this very problem through these invasive grasses that were used, and that's also meat consumption as well, to feed cattle on Hawaii. And yeah, absolutely. The wealthy and powerful colonizers are going to use this kind of like disaster to entrench their own power and to make more money and to make billions of dollars. That's not up for dispute. That's absolutely going to happen. But because that's just a regular symptom of our economic, of capitalism, of settler colonialism, two things that guys like this would die defending. They would die to defend these systems that they've invested their whole personalities in. Rather than acknowledging that, they've got to invent this wacky conspiracy shit to talk about why these things are happening. Lots of UFO stuff going around, and I don't doubt on TikTok, if you dig in there, I'm sure there's a lot of crossover with all the UFO stuff. The UFO people have been going crazy lately as well, and I'm sure there's some crossover between the wildfire stuff and the UFO stuff. Fucking wacky shit. I'm gonna actually look on TikTok to see if we can find anything else in this vein.
Do you ever just...
Alright. Sorry. Automatic playing. Let's see if I can find any of this wacky shit. These are images of the directed energy weapons. What was the acronym? DEW Hawaii.
So today we're going to give a little update on the Hawaiian fires. Now I want you
Yeah,
to
here's
look
this
at this
guy.
footage. And
Oh, this seems like just a repost. Vegan fella. It's coming from Vegan fella.
So today we're going to give a little update on the Hawaiian fires.
Oh no, this is just getting reposted over and over. I can hardly find the original.
So today we're going to give a little update on the Hawaiian.
This may have been on Instagram. Yeah, I think it probably was actually. Can't wait for Neo Maui to be announced as a tech startup campus with exclusive integrated resort. And like that's the kind of thing that they're pointing to as being the conspiracy, right? It's like, oh yeah, they're going to have some kind of integrated city that's going to emerge from this. But like, yeah, what we were talking about is a fucking horrible corporate dystopia that they're using these natural events to entrench their own power and their own hold over these lands. I thought the DEW stuff was people talking about wet grass, not space labors. Now, DEW, DEW, directed energy weapon.
So today we're
The recent fires in Hawaii. Have you noticed all the cars and buildings have been burnt to shreds, but none of the trees burnt? Have you noticed all the media articles about climate change causing the fires? It's so obvious. We have to start thinking for ourselves.
Yeah, think for yourselves. You gotta think for yourselves, please.
Don't worry if you can't hear what I'm saying. I couldn't even hear myself. This is the loudest sound you could possibly conceive. And, as it turns out, the cleanest. Now, the most amazing thing is that cloud up there, which was generated by the engine, is just a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen. It's water vapor. And in about an hour's time, someone in Mississippi is going to get wet washing. It will.
Just to be clear, this react video where this guy is watching this clip and going, The entire time. This has 443.5k likes. $443,000.
Will actually rain. I told you. It's raining. That's unbelievable.
There's a lot of this shit.
Have you noticed any of this lately?
They always put this sound, this spooky soundtrack. You can make any fucking brain dead observation about any of this stuff, and you put this sound behind it, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, this is kind of spooky. It's kind of spooky here. This still counts as man-made climate change. Checkmate, conspiracy nerds. Thank you. Yeah, is it time we close the internet? Well, you look at like ByteDance and TikTok and the way that TikTok is regulated in China. People say like China's trying to destroy the people's minds. But it's like, no, it's like there's a platform that's being provided. If you're in China, this shit you're not allowed to say this kind of shit. It gets blocked, and things that go to the top of your algorithm, your For You page, are like things about nature, things about like cool things, interesting science, things that might be of value to you, or especially for kids. And because we have this like libertarian tech bro brain rot to control, like that's the idea of that is like censorship. But no, if you can have these platforms, if you have a strong state with a specific sort of ideological bent to it, using that to promote valuable and positive things. We do not have that. It's not the platform that's the problem. It's our complete inability to regulate these platforms in any way. 403,000 likes.
Shitty cell phone signal. Dry mouth, especially at night in bed.
Is this a joke?
No.
Is this a fucking joke? My Wi-Fi is not so good. Let's not blame the telecom companies. I have dry mouth at night. Maybe just get a drink of water. They're like, no, this is evidence that our climate modification system is in effect now. Fucking bizarre.
Who's burning? Ears hurt. Extreme fatigue.
Yeah, maybe that has something to do with COVID.
Back pain.
Maybe you have long COVID.
Racing heart for no reason. Odd smell.
It must be the vax.
Upset stomach.
No, you put this music behind anything and it just sounds very
Tests
sinister
are
and scary.
negative. Annoying hacking cough that has been lingering and won't seem to go away.
It does sound exactly like long COVID, or you're just getting older, yeah. And the number one comment.
Have you noticed?
The number one comment from Amanda Victoria. Welcome to the world of weather modification. That's the conclusion. That's the conclusion that's being drawn from all those variety of symptoms. Welcome to the world of weather modification. And Steph, the creator, says, right. Truly incredible. Truly incredible stuff. I'm trying to make the connection with Hawaii.
Listen to what this guy says about the fires in Maui. He's about to drop some truth bombs. Listen.
But I need you guys to hear me out. You don't see what's going on. I feel something is bigger. I've been on Maui the last 9 years.
He's been in Maui 9 years. Listen to what he's about to say now.
Location and how everything works. There was no fucking way that a hurricane missed Big Island, went to Maui.
No way.
Didn't flood them. Didn't give them, crazy other things, but it caused fires. It caused fires, and not only on Maui, but it caused fires in the most precious parts of real estate.
There you go.
In Maui. Lahaina Front Street is worth billions. The Hawaiians that have been holding out and the Kanaka have been holding out for years,
That's
not
it,
wanting
dude.
to sell their property in Lahaina due to these big
Now the property is going to be available.
companies. It is not a coincidence. I don't believe.
And is it a coincidence that these people are going to profit from this shit? No. No, it isn't. But like, fuck. These people keep coming right up to the truth of all of this stuff and are just unable to put it together. You got the Hans Zimmer sounds in there.
Yeah. Hey. Okay. Ooh. Okay. Yeah. I do not miss. Hey. Started from Cali and now I got bitches in Europe. They singing my shit. Remember, it's never the critic who counts. That's just the way that it is. Huh. Tell me, why would I listen to you on this shit when you never could do what I did?
I don't know. 21K views on that one. These are more from the past. This is from June 2021.
This
What it looks
is
like.
what it looks like when a heart machine is activating.
This is the other spooky sound that they play when they want to be serious about this shit.
They're up to something.
It's literally just lightning. I love this track too.
More proof.
Do I need more proof that this is a harp weather machine? Yes, I do actually. Yes, I do need exactly that. This is me laser beam thing. What's that lightning's game? With hurricanes come massive rain, which would have put the fires out. I smell BS, says this guy. Craig Thomas says China balloons. They already been attacking us. And this is like Barfcast, everyone going insane at a time when we desperately need people to keep it together. Like, not only are we going insane, like in our collective societies, but like we need to have a global response to climate if we want to have any hope whatsoever of dealing with the consequences of climate change. We need to have a unified global response, which needs to involve a deep diplomatic relationship with China. But we're going in the opposite direction. That's not just the wacky conspiracy theories and Tim Pool guys on YouTube, but it's like the US government is just doing everything we can to push us away from that possibility. And of course the Canadians are going along like the dutiful lapdogs of US imperialism that we are. Pretty depressing state of affairs, folks. It's a depressing state of affairs. I just need to take like a moment to like walk around. I'm just sore from sitting in my chair all day. Oh, Barfcast. Jeez. Barfcast, thank you so much for the $100. That's so kind of you.
Here's some Saturday money for you, Rob.
Barfcast, oh my goodness. I really, really appreciate that. And it's really much needed right now, honestly. It is much needed. I'm behind the 8 ball in a number of ways here. And Barfcast, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you for that. $100. My goodness. What's going on with the cat? I think she's doing better. It was a bit of a scary situation, but doing better. We've got a little bit of a better cat to poop ratio now. We do. You know, a lot of the things that we're talking about today as well, I know is being covered in Abby Martin's new movie. I really got to talk to Abby Martin. Because, like, this specifically, I think they've specifically focused on Hawaii a lot in this film. Yes, the military-industrial complex is the problem. No, it's not because they're shooting space lasers at Hawaii in order to have nice real estate deals for American capitalists. No, they're causing the climate change with their own activities, and then they're capitalizing on the consequences of that, these very billionaires and the very same people. It's really not hard to wrap your mind around.
Where we're heading is extremely grim. So we have to brace ourselves for what's coming.
There are still many secrets. The water on the base was contaminated, hence all the dead babies. Oh, shit.
These toxic chemicals are in the blood of my people.
They have littered our land with bombs.
Fire in the hole! Yeah, look at the ways that they're toxifying Hawaii's drinking water.
Animals. Just keep quiet. Do you hear a bird?
The United States military is the #1 polluter in the world.
I have not authorized this.
The military is untouchable.
This is the problem to the conspiracy wackos. Here's your problem. If you actually care about any of this shit, here's the problem. We can provide the answers, but it's up to these people to get their fucking heads out of their asses to pay attention to it.
They consider themselves above the law.
They're filming us.
The military being the single largest consumer of fossil fuels on the planet, how can they be given a free pass?
The emissions from the military should be exempt. Do you agree with that?
I want to say thank you to our National Guard.
We must stop this violent death machine if we want to survive on this earth.
The ships, the guns, the planes. This is the greatest assembly of power that the world has ever seen. And we haven't finished yet.
Folks, I promise you that Abby Martin will come on this program to talk about this film. This is my solemn promise to you. Okay? Abby Martin will come on this show to talk about this film. It's sad because I see all these things that we lean on so much, like this film has raised 2,113 out of 10,000. I see Breakthrough News like nowhere near their goals as well. You know, I feel a little bit like we are taking some of these creators like Abby Martin and like the Breakthrough News people a little bit for granted. And it's like we really, I find they do such valuable work on YouTube. It's the frustrating thing about Pool. Again, it's not just me. I'm not just complaining about myself, but like there's so much really fantastic stuff on YouTube when you know how to find it. And it's like, it's so hard to try and turn that into kind of a sustainable living whether it's me, whether it's like people like Abby Martin or Rania Kalik and Eugene and Brian Becker, or Ben Norden, although he seems to be doing pretty well. It's like, it's so fucking hard. And the people that do rise to the top of that are just the most painful, insipid pieces of shit. Whether it's Tim Pool on YouTube, whether it's people like XQC that become like massively successful Twitch streamers, it's enough to make me want to just smash my fucking head into a wall, honestly. This should be good.
This episode and others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you haven't heard already, I run a podcast called The Deprogram with Hakeem and Ugopnik. We tackle all sorts of topics, from theory to current events to culture, and just generally have a good time. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy, check out The Deprogram by following any of the links below. Global collapse is here. Our summers are longer, hotter, and deadlier. Floods, hurricanes, and wildfires have not only become increasingly common, but more intense. The oceans are rising, and thousands of species are going extinct. Millions of people will need to abandon the place they called home, and many have already started. We are living through the climate catastrophe, but it's not too late to act, and we already know how. Earlier this year, the UN published this report on crises and climate change. In a document with the catchy name Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction 2022, more specifically in this companion paper, the UN uses a sentence it's never used before to describe what lies ahead for humanity: total societal collapse. After considering 4 potential scenarios, the UN finds that in 3 of them, humanity will face an increase in global catastrophes, with only one scenario staving off the worst that climate change will produce. One scenario keeps us relatively safe, 3 lead us down a very dark path. In no uncertain terms, collapse, droughts, famines, poverty, disease. These will all become permanent and widespread features of human existence, provided that we do not act to remain within our planetary boundaries. And this report makes it clear that without immediate, decisive efforts, the feedback loops and codependencies between our climate and our politics will plunge the world into some dark and increasingly difficult to escape times. But okay, who cares? We've heard this a million times before. Yeah, some fish and bugs are dying. Yeah, it's getting hotter. It's getting harder to grow crops some places. So what? What's the bottom line here? I think it's important to look at the situation from a more human perspective. We've been told for years that we're on track for disaster. We've been given mountains of evidence, scores of scientific reports, and scientists all around the world are united in the same effort. But what gets lost in all this is how it affects us. Normal people in our everyday lives. Like, intellectually, I know that losing pollinating insects is bad, but is it something I think about in my daily life? Not really. What's really driven the problem home for me is watching people's totally unprofessional phone footage. I can watch 100 news pieces about rising sea levels with flashy graphics showing the coastline of Florida, but it doesn't really click until I see someone showing their home being destroyed. Someone with no video training, no agenda, just a person who is watching a lifetime of memories being ruined and sharing it on the internet because they don't know what else to do. That's what collapse looks like in the 21st century. Watching countless cell phone videos of death and destruction creeping closer and closer until one day, you're the one filming. It's hearing about a climate scientist lighting himself on fire in a desperate bid to get those in power to listen. For people like me, it's going to shoot a documentary in the Marshall Islands and seeing firsthand the waves knocking on the doors of people whose families have lived there for generations. Every single one of those people will have to leave. They'll have to uproot their entire life, escape to some foreign country, and watch their homeland sink into the sea. This will affect all of us, some sooner than others, like the inhabitants of the Marshall Islands and countless other low-lying islands and coastlines. At some point, we will watch everything we care about be reclaimed by nature, or scorched beyond repair, or swept off the map by the next record-breaking storm. Even if you think climate change is perfectly natural, despite decades of research, much of which was actively hidden from the public by fossil fuel companies, why would you just wait and let it destroy your community? If you're out for a walk and a car is bearing down on you, and you're clearly going to be run over, does it really matter whether the driver is intentionally trying to hit you or if his brakes are out? Of course not. Your response should be the same in either case. You step out of the way. So, How do we step out of the way? So far, the plan looks like this.
I often note and have talked with many of you about our shared belief that our world is increasingly more interconnected and interdependent. That is especially true when it comes to the climate crisis, which is why we will work together and continue to work together to address these issues, to tackle these challenges, and to work together as we continue to work together, operating from the new norms, rules, and agreements that we will convene to work together on to galvanize global action. With that, I thank you all. This is a matter of urgent priority for all of us, and I know we will work on this together.
Okay, why don't we actually look at our options? The first thing that's been proposed for years to slow or even halt the advance of climate change is the idea of green growth. From the World Bank to the Green New Deal, many governments and international organizations around the world have argued that our first priority in preventing the worst effects of climate change is to make capitalism go green. At the core of these proposals is the transition to renewable energies and the idea that, while a lot needs to change in how we produce our electricity, very little needs to fundamentally change with how our society organizes production and consumption writ large. In other words, we don't need to sacrifice growth, overproduction, overconsumption, or anything else so long as we simply make things sustainable and renewable. It's a project that plenty of banks and investment firms have latched onto as well, with the creation of environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG funds, in the past 20 years. Portfolios of companies to invest in that, among other things, offer a green alternative to traditional investments while also delivering consistent profits to investors. The overall message of all these measures is that, so long as we make the right things profitable, we will get out of the climate change trap and come out, if not unscathed, at least safe. It's a win-win. It's growth without any of the moral hang-ups of environmental exploitation, or the pollution of production and consumption. And while it might sound great to some, green growth is a lie. We cannot keep growing our economy year after year and also rein in climate change. One of them will need to give. Here's why. First, a little bit about growth. Our economy is based on the promise of growth. Every quarter, capitalist firms must deliver more to their investors than they did last quarter. Same with national GDP. Every company everywhere, and every country too, under capitalism, has to do the same thing: grow exponentially or start suffering the consequences. Companies that don't grow when their competitors do, die. But growth isn't magical. At the scale of an entire country's economy, for the whole thing to grow, there must necessarily be a ramp-up in production. You can't just increase consumption, which is the way we measure growth, without producing more in some way or another. So we do. We produce more. More things, more energy, more waste. More production entails more extraction, transportation, carbon emissions, trash, and so on. We take more things out of the ground, move more things around, and throw more things away. It's what makes the numbers on the graph go up. But on a planet with finite resources, this kind of system doesn't work. We can't keep pulling more from the Earth year after year and not expect there to be a point when that's no longer an option. We can either plan for it, or we will be forced to reckon with it at the worst possible time, and then it'll be too late. And while green growth promises us this can change, that we can continue this project of growth without increasing extraction and production, there is empirical evidence that we cannot. In an analysis of multiple green growth models, 2 economists have found that even in the best case scenario, the idea of green growth does not work. That's considering any prediction model, no matter how optimistic. In their paper, Hickel and Callis find that extant empirical evidence does not support the theory of green growth, or more precisely, that there is no evidence that we can have sustainability and growth at the same time, at least as we're first transitioning. All the economic and environmental models they look at only work when GDP growth approaches 0, or in other words, when growth is factored out of the equation. The problem is not that it's theoretically impossible to make our economy sustainable or founded on renewable energy. We can do all that and continue to live very fulfilling lives without needing our standards of living to drop. The problem is that it's not going to be profitable or quick enough by any metric, even the most optimistic of estimates. While it might be a successful model someday, green growth won't work in time. The problem is that while it's possible to transition to 100% renewable energy, we cannot do it fast enough to stay under 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius if we continue to grow the global economy at existing rates. Again, more growth means more energy demand, and more energy demand makes it all the more difficult, impossible in fact, to generate enough renewable capacity to meet it. We can't grow and transition to renewables fast enough to match that growth. It's already hard enough to have it meet our current demands, and the time frame isn't working in our favor, even when we're generous with our estimates. Then there's the fact that this approach isn't working.
Seems to me that degrowth is inevitable, and the political fallout of degrowth could easily be worse than the environmental disasters. Like I was saying before, Sans is fine. It's like, when we talk about degrowth, I think it's the primary ways that like areas where that needs to happen is like the military industrial complex and these vast industries which are just contributing like nothing really, or are completely like unsustainable food system where we're getting food shipped in these gigantic ships, grown in one place, shipped halfway around the world to be bottled or canned or whatever, and then shipped back to us. Like there's a number of ways. We get into thorny territory when the degrowth starts affecting the people that have had the rawest deal under this system, both domestically and internationally. Like we can't look at people that are around the developing world that are trying to develop their economies and develop their societies and have more electricity and maybe some more consumer goods and stuff and say like, no, you're not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. I mean, we can, but it's a little bit arrogant and insulting. Like that VJ clip says, it's like when we're talking about China or whatever other developing nation contributing to climate change, it's absurd considering how much the West generally has like monopolized these kinds of things and like is specifically overwhelmingly being the primary like emitters, like carbon emitters. While a lot of these places are like manufacturing the consumer goods that we're purchasing. I think we do have to have a conversation about degrowth. I think the primary ways that it needs to happen though is in these massive industries, especially the military industrial complex. And like we were saying, we do need to have a conversation about our food system and about the way our society and our economy is organized. And that's the thing, we do these in these individual levels. Like we talked about eating less meat can be a really valuable like environmental factor, but ultimately everyone in this chat can individually decide to like make these changes, but that doesn't actually have any impact. We need to have a gigantic social shift in the way that we organize these things. And like you're saying, Sans, we've seen already how reactionary people are and how much they're going to react really, really strongly and even violently towards anything that threatens their ability to have whatever they want whenever they want it. Like look at the way that people reacted to COVID and just the idea of maybe spending some time not going out to fucking Applebee's for a couple weeks, maybe so we can get this under control. Or just this inability to participate in this nonstop consumer culture, how they personally offended they were to the point that they lost their minds over it, and there's the big convoy and all this kind of stuff. So that's the thing. It's like this is like the dialectic that we're running into. Yeah, we do need to talk about degrowth. No, we shouldn't be dumping all the degrowth on the people that have the least, both in our society and around the world. But we do need to have a conversation about degrowth and what that means versus the amount of power that these reactionaries have in our supposedly free Western liberal democracy. And what do you come up with when you take that dialectic and you look at what the result is going to be? Like, we can't even do the bare minimum. Look at how these people are freaking out about 15-minute cities. Even like smart urban design and transit and things like that. They're talking about it like they're going to be sent to Dachau or whatever. This is the fundamental issue. Our whole society, our whole culture is broken, and these extreme reactionaries are given so much power. And it's basically impossible to make even minor changes to our system, let alone major historic, world historic, vast systemic changes that we need to make. Like we can't even do the bare minimum. And as long as we still have the same political system and the same kind of society and the amount of power that these capitalist industries have in creating the media in the first place and controlling people in that way, it's like we don't have any opportunity. There's no chance. There's just no chance, That's the fundamental kind of contradiction that we run up against, I think.
As expected right now. Those ESG funds I mentioned earlier, the funds that offer green investment alternatives, they're not always profitable, and oftentimes less profitable than their fossil-dependent counterparts. If our goal is to wait for the market to make the best...
Remember the Obama thing? There was like Obama made some investment in like a solar panel company. It was like Solandra or something like that. That wasn't profitable or that went out of business, and it became this big conservative talking point for like 8 entire years about it. You know? Remember the Solandra stuff? Hello, Donna Macaroni. How's it going? Happy Saturday to you.
Most sustainable option also become the most profitable, we will be waiting a long time. Too long. But we don't need to get into the technical or scientific breakdowns of individual green growth models to see how this general approach is wrong. Even if we assume that Hickel and Callis's analysis is completely incorrect, and that the green growth models they criticize actually do get it right, and in time to prevent 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius of global warming, there is a much greater obstacle in our way. Power.
Like, yes, Solandra got like 50K in subsidies, like nothing at all. It's this huge deal. It's amazing. Meanwhile, we just subsidize the entire fossil fuel industry is operated through government subsidies. That, of course, is just A-okay. Obviously. I don't think people want to be impressed. I do think it's because climate change is scary, and when you're in survival mode, the reality of the long road to good things is hard to imagine, let alone see. You know what? I think that's a good point too. And in fact, there's a person on Twitter that I follow that I like quite a lot, which is Roxy Tall, and she's kind of talked about this theory that she has, that a lot of it is based in this kind of like fear that people have, this deep-rooted fear in our future, and they're so unable to confront this fear that they have about our changing world and the scary future that we're headed towards, that their minds just snap, essentially. I think there's something to that as well.
The oil and gas industry is the most capitalized industry in the world.
Thank you. Yeah.
Simply put, that means that oil and gas is where the most money is. More money is concentrated in fossil fuels than in all of retail, or all of banking, or all of the tech sector. The total capitalization of the oil and gas industry is equivalent to $6.7 trillion. If we think of global capitalism as the arena where competition between industries happens, then this is a competition where fossil fuels have the best hand. Fossil fuels have the most money, and therefore the most power. In concrete terms, that means the oil and gas industry has the ability to prevent almost any sort of action that would hurt its interests. While we can theorize about green growth models and what happens if we transition to renewables at this or that rate, with this or that expected level of growth, the fossil fuel industry can prevent all of it from happening. It can sabotage like no other industry can. At the government level, fossil fuels have been lining the pockets of politicians for years, with prominent figures like Joe Manchin receiving millions of dollars from the coal industry to block the passage of even the most lukewarm anti-emission plans. In the media, fossil fuel companies have been discrediting climate change science for decades, with advertisements and fossil-friendly journalists obscuring the evidence or trying to spin attention away, like in this horrifying clip from this summer.
On a serious note, folks, by early next week, you can scrap 20 degrees, it could well be 40 degrees. I think there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of excess deaths early next week. The charts that I can see in front of me are frightening. So we all like nice weather, but this will not be nice weather. This will be potentially lethal weather for a couple of days. It'll be brief, but it'll be brutal.
Oh,
so,
John,
we can
So, John, I want us to be happy about the weather and every single... I don't know whether something's happened to meteorologists to make you all a little bit fatalistic and harbingers of doom, because all...
There's a whole Wall Street Journal piece about that the other day as well. It's like the climate alarmist cult or something like that. It's like, man, fuck, you know? What do you even say about that?
The broadcast, particularly on the BBC, every time I've turned on, anyone's talking about the weather, they're saying that there's going to be tons of fatalities. But haven't we always had hot weather?
More recently, fossil fuel companies have switched to presenting climate change as though it's a problem of individual consumption, like in a series of BP ads I covered in this video, rather than an economy-wide problem in the way we organize production. Fossil fuel companies have also worked for decades to bury renewable energy production and alternative ways to consume energy. They've tried to kill electric cars, an alternative that only ever offered a minuscule environmental benefit compared to gas-powered cars, but nonetheless
That's the amazing thing, though, is that like if we had like implemented that electric car technology in like the 70s and 80s, might have actually made a big impact. Less so now that it's like way too late. It's nowhere near enough. There's a lot of things that that's the very madness inducing thing that the longer you think about it, the more you want to like, do terrible things that you can't talk about because of the terms of service on twitch.tv. But just the fact that like there's plenty of things like these 15-minute cities, like these smart urban design tweaks, like electric vehicles, all kinds of things that we could have done realistically in the 70s and 80s when we knew this was an issue, which was confirmed by climate scientists employed by the oil and gas industry. We knew it was an issue. We knew exactly what was happening. There's a number of things that could have been done at that time that would have really made a genuine impact and could have maybe avoided the really scary future that we're heading towards now. And we didn't do any of it. And it's now it's like, now that it's almost too late, now that it's right on the fucking doorstep, or trains. Yes, thank you. Mass investment in transit and rail at that time. Now that it's right on the doorstep, we're starting to talk about these things, and it's so too late. And none of these things, which are decent, sensible ideas in and of themselves, electric vehicles and smart urban planning and this stuff, none of it is nowhere near enough. And you know what is going to happen is rather than like change our economic system or our culture or our society in any way, we're going to block out the sun. Get ready for more and more conversations about that. I'm not kidding, by the way. Get ready to hear more and more conversations about that as the years go on, as we get into like the 30s, and we start talking about big, drastic Hail Marys to stop climate change. It's not going to be, let's change our economic system. Let's not have access to every single consumer good or food product that we can need at any time. It's going to be like, let's fucking spray chemicals in the atmosphere to block out the sun. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be the thing from the Matrix, the Animatrix. That's going to be our big Hail Mary thing, rather than change one thing about our society and our lifestyle. We should nuke the sun's ass. Exactly. I agree. Yeah, just to be safe. Yeah, and then the chemtrail types are going to come out for sure. Don't plants need sunlight? That's just a woke liberal conspiracy. I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Fossil fuels commanding market share. Our entire social reproduction is happening under the ruling hand of fossil fuels. The way our society produces, consumes, and then justifies these practices in legal and cultural texts is heavily directed by fossil fuels and their interests. They decide what gets made, how it's advertised, how it's regulated, and at the end of the day, how we're meant to feel about it. Even if we could get all the green growth models to work in theory, if we could make our energy use optimally efficient, or even give up on the idea of growth entirely, our transition to a sustainable economy will not happen with fossil fuel interests standing in the way. So long as they are committed to being the most powerful player in the global economy, whether that's a growing economy or not, they will prevent change from happening. And what's terrifying is that their power will likely only grow over time as fossil fuels become more scarce and we are still trapped.
That'd be a great excuse to just switch to carnivore diet.
While
exactly.
We've
no
been
problem.
told that the coming scarcity of oil will push us into renewable energy sooner, scarcity is the name of the capitalist game. You can't make money when something's abundant. It's when it's scarce that the big bucks come in. The more our global oil reserves slowly dwindle, or the more we place restrictions on how much we allow to be extracted without directly controlling prices, the more valuable that oil becomes, and the more profits can be extracted from its sale. Look no further than what is happening right now.
Space bubbles?
2022 has been a year of record profits for oil and gas companies. To take a specific example, one French fossil fuel company, Total Energy, saw bigger earnings this year than any other company has in the entire history of the French economy. What all this means is that a small handful of people, led by the sole motivation to deliver greater profits than their competitors year after year, are making decisions that benefit their interests over those of the rest of humanity. They are fiercely clinging to their profits at the expense of our collective survival. The solution is obvious. We need an economic model that is democratic, that takes power away from the unaccountable few and returns it to the many. While many people tend to think of capitalism and democracy as synonyms, the case of what to do about climate change is a great example of why equating these two terms is misguided. Given the power to decide what to do about climate change, everyday people make vastly different decisions from corporations. As we've all seen, corporations choose profits and more extraction. But what about people? In a 2014 experiment, researchers at Harvard and Yale tasked people with the responsibility of managing collective resources among themselves and for future generations. The expectation was that if capitalism is a true reflection of democracy and the natural tendency of humans, this study group would essentially arrive at the same conclusion as our modern capitalist economy. They would deplete their resources and screw over future generations in favor of immediate profits. After all, we're often told that it's human nature to be greedy, or that when resources are not privately owned, they succumb to the so-called tragedy of the commons. Everybody acts selfishly to the point of exhausting common resources. Since each individual has more to gain by acting selfishly than by making sure the common good is preserved for everyone, the philosophical experiment always ends with people ruining it for each other and is used to justify splitting up common goods into private hands. But like many experiments before it, the Harvard and Yale study found that the opposite is true. Researchers found that, on average, a full 68% of individuals chose to use their share sustainably, taking only as much as the pool could regenerate, sacrificing possible profits so that future generations could thrive. In other words, the majority of people behave exactly the opposite of how economic theory predicts. More interestingly, when people were put in a democratic conversation about how to organize these resources as a group, since the overwhelming majority prioritized sustainability over profits,
the idea of greed as a human nature is a capitalist myth.
Limited resources in perpetuity. They gave up profits. In other words, democracy works to combat climate change because when we're not broken up into little profit-maximizing machines, we make decisions that truly are better for everyone. And you don't have to trust this study by Harvard and Yale researchers if you don't want to. We've seen real-world examples of the same thing. Back in 2019, in response to the Yellow Vest protests, the French government gave everyday people a chance to exercise their democratic power. The government selected a group of 150 people completely randomly from all of France and tasked them with planning a 40% decrease in carbon emissions by 2030. Over the course of only 8 weekends, everyday people like you and me, not scientists, not academics, not politicians, people as young as 16 and as old as 80, more representative of the class, gender, and age makeup of the general population than the French Congress, all heard from experts, debated amongst themselves, and found ways to protect the environment. Not only that, they knew that after they were done, their propositions would be submitted to a national referendum, and if successful, would become actual law. It was a daunting task, and they weren't given very much time, but normal citizens stepped up and got to work. Like in the Harvard-Yale experiment, the assembly chose sustainability. They proposed banning all advertisements for the most polluting products like cars or plane rides, banning single-use plastic by 2023, banning internal flights of less than 4 hours in favor of trains, ending planned obsolescence, making recycling mandatory for all plastic products, transitioning away from trucks as a means of transporting goods, making landlords renovate all buildings to be energy efficient by 2040, enforcing high taxes for polluting industries, and many, many more radical propositions in a list of about 150, which were noted in a publicly accessible 460-page document. So, what happened? Did France suddenly become a paradise of eco-utopianism? No. Within the first few sessions of the Assembly, its members realized that in order to achieve the kinds of measures that were necessary to prevent the most adverse climate change consequences, they would need to hurt industrial profits. It was clear that capitalism was not compatible with this project. But people were willing to compromise some profits and some production for continued survivability. They made difficult decisions knowing it would mean a chance to continue living on a planet suited for human needs. They recognized the need for radicality, and in many ways, they embraced it. But of course, this didn't go over well with the government. Immediately, the neoliberal French president and his ministers descended on the assembly. In a series of speeches trying to divert the democratic process, France's politicians tried to get the assembly to be reasonable and not get too many crazy ideas, telling them there's no such thing as, quote, magic money, and other such claims intended to pacify
no magic money tree. They say that in the UK as well all the time.
The assembly stayed the course and demanded change. But since messing with the assembly wasn't enough, Macron opted for outright denial. The referendum that was meant to take place at the end of the 8 weeks never did. In fact, most of the policies proposed by the Assembly were either
We need
heavily
that
watered
Nigerian
down or, in a few
uranium.
instances, outright vetoed, as was the case for a proposed 4% tax on companies making more than 10 million euros to finance these projects. In stark contrast to the government's refusal, a national poll found that a majority of French people would have supported most measures. What this case shows is that people are ready for change, and they're ready to make difficult decisions. Capitalists aren't. What's it going to be? A brutal, dystopian, unlivable future for the majority of humanity, all so a few executives can keep their profits, or a brighter, fairer, sustainable future for us and for our children. A world where human flourishing matters more than the blood-soaked dollars in corporate bank accounts. Let's decide for ourselves, or we might lose the chance. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this kind of content is made possible by my patrons on Patreon.
Thank you for that. That was a great video from Second Thought to talk about how our economic system is contributing to this. The woke police. They've finally found me. They finally found me. The climate police, exactly. They're coming to bring me to my new 15-minute city that they're going to force me into. With Bill Gates, Gates Sorosville is going to be called. They're bringing me over now. Serious question. I assume that Chinese leadership is aware of the life-threatening acceleration of climate change. Is there a point in the future where they should attempt to openly attack Western capitalism if it means giving the human race some chance of survival? I mean, you can point to a lot of things that China is doing right now. They're the only major nation that is really remotely taking this seriously. So even though they have this policy of non-interference in other one's affairs and probably don't want to start World War III with the United States, which would not be good for the climate or anyone else, they are doing more than anyone to try and combat this problem, as much as they get framed as being the culprit. The number one emitter in all these things, as we know, the number one emitter per capita are not even close to being the number one emitter. And also the reason their emissions are so high, as we've talked about many times, is because they're producing all of our shit. And if we took back the manufacturing industry that we sent overseas in two places like China, their emissions would drop and ours would rise because we would be making all the shit right now that they're currently making. So that's the last thing I wanted to look at today, which is this Ben Norton video from Geopolitical Economy Report about the way that this very phenomenon, I don't think we saw this, it was just a couple weeks ago it got released, that's going to get into what Beijing is actually doing to lead the world in renewable energy, which is what we don't do, right? We keep making promises, especially Canada. We just make promises over and over and over about this stuff, and we never live up to them. We never follow through on any of the things that we're planning on doing. Whereas China is maybe a little bit more realistic about how long it's going to take for them to do this transition, but they're being realistic, but they're meaningfully taking action to make sure this transition takes place. That's the big difference, right? Like we're saying net zero by 2030 or something, which is it's just unfathomably stupid. And we're talking about investing in carbon capture and all these fake technologies that don't exist. That's what we're doing, whereas China's meaningfully taking steps using technology that currently exists. I don't mean a nuclear strike, but they could at least make attempts to destabilize the West by secretly paying communist streamers. I mean, I agree with that. As I've said many times, I think that's something that they should consider, considering the amount of pro bono, pro-China propaganda I'm engaged in on this platform. I would like to get a little something, maybe eventually, Like this as well. This was just the other day. Marco Rubio is talking about going after these left-wing outlets like People's Forum to go after Chinese funding. And look at that. I made this totally pro bono. It says the CCP is our greatest adversary. We cannot allow it to continue to abuse our system. See, I'm doing this totally free. totally free of charge, making these kind of memes. You'd think maybe eventually I could get some kind of recognition for that. You know, that's all. That's all I'm saying. And folks, before we continue with the stream, I can't stick around too much longer. After this video, I have to leave and go pick up my kid. So I can't stick around too much longer. Before we watch this final video, though, this Ben Norton video, one more time, if you enjoy the program, I'm not really taking any time to like stop or do a big shill segment where I dance or do weird shit. I've been trying to put together a decent length stream here on Saturday. It's been fantastic, but please, if you can, support TRRS. I'm at 8 out of 35 subs for the day. It seems to be just like generally slower on Saturday, which is I'm realizing now. So, you know, who knows what that's going to mean. But if you can, please subscribe. A few brave heroes could get me at least a little bit closer to the sub goal, and every little bit really helps. Again, I told you I'm kind of behind the 8 ball. I got vet bills. I got all kinds of bad shit going on that I have to try and make up the difference here. So if you can, if you want to support the work that I do here on Twitch, please subscribe to TRRS. We got Vexing Thoughts asking for a possible gifted sub opportunity.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through
We got a couple of unsub chatters right now. Part Ian, thank you very much for the 2 gifted subs. That is very kind of you. Just a few brave heroes could step to the plate and get me a little bit closer to the goal, which would make doing this stream like still kind of worthwhile. So if you can, please subscribe. Okay? Please subscribe. It costs $5. It's completely free of charge if you have an Amazon Prime account. And any help, any sub gifters or tippers or friend coin donators, it all helps a lot, and I appreciate it a lot. Maybe before this day is through, we can get a little tiny little bit closer to the goal, okay? But we'll see. And I'm sorry to have to continue to hit you over the head with this. As you know, I don't particularly enjoy having to try and crack the whip on people and get people to subscribe to this program, but unfortunately, this is just the reality of being a Twitch streamer. I've spent, if I'm going to spend 4 or 5 hours of my day doing this, ideally, we got to make the number go up a little tiny bit, if not to the goal.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Exactly, Dakadoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for the 100 friend coin. And if anyone else can please subscribe to the program, it would mean a lot if you could do that. Anyway, one final video today we're going to look at. And then I got to get out of here. But I think this is a good way to finish up this talk, especially if we're going to focus specifically on what China is doing in terms of like investing in renewables and actually meaningfully trying to fight climate change using these kind of policies.
The United States really is the world's most hypocritical country. We can see this in many different ways when Washington lectures other countries about human rights and democracy, considering that the United States wages war around the world. The US has 800 foreign military bases, and the United States has around 4% of the global population, and yet 20% of the world's entire prison population. But another clear example of this hypocrisy, and one that is increasingly
talking about China as well, you see that graph of prison population, and you're like, wow, China, 1.6 million people. I mean, yeah, that's right. But it's a nation of 1.2 billion people? Is that the number? Like, it's the same thing with climate change, where per capita, you realize how we like vastly dwarf them in both emissions and in prison population,
and yet 20% of the world's entire prison population. But another clear example of this hypocrisy, and one that is increasingly common, is Washington accusing other countries of not doing enough to fight climate change. This is especially ironic given that if you look at the data going back to 1750, the United States historically has been the largest contributor to climate change on all of planet Earth, cumulatively emitting more
lonely white woman.
From one animal lover to another.
Thank you very much, lonely white woman. That's very kind of you. Thank you for the $10. I really appreciate that. Very, very generous. And I don't know who that is, but someone's going to snap that person up because that's a very generous and kind-hearted person.
Carbon dioxide, that is CO2, than any other country. In the past few years, as China has developed economically and become the world's manufacturing superpower, responsible for nearly 1/3 of global manufacturing, I'm going to put in the description below the link to a video in which I discuss that historic transition. As China has carried out this remarkable economic development and lifted more than 800 million people out of poverty, that has meant that as the economy develops, China is now emitting more and more CO2. So the United States has criticized China, but there are so many misleading elements to Washington's rhetoric about Beijing. One of Washington's favorite talking points to attack China is the fact that China has become the world's largest net emitter of CO2. However, I need to emphasize net because that does not take into consideration the importance of the size of the Chinese population. The United States constantly wags its finger at China and says, China needs to do more to fight climate change. It needs to reduce its carbon emissions. What is not acknowledged is that China has a population that is 4 times larger than the US population.
Yes,
there
it
are
is.
1.4 billion people in China. Compare that to the US, which has around 340 million. That is to say, there are 4 times more people in China than in the US. So if you look at per capita CO2 emissions, that is by head per capita, that is, you take the total emissions and divide it by the number of people in the country, you can see that the United States has led the world in carbon emissions. And this is not something recent. This goes back well over 100 years. The most recent data from 2021 shows that the US still emits nearly twice as much carbon per capita as China does. So when you hear people in the United States and other Western countries criticize China for carbon emissions, keep in mind, once again, the size of the population. This isn't to mention, by the way, if you look back historically, the US and Canada and other Western countries have a major historic responsibility to bear the biggest burden in fighting climate change. Because if you look at China's per capita carbon emissions, it wasn't until 2005 that it passed the world average. So China, for less than 20 years, has been above the world average of carbon emissions, whereas the United States has been above the world average of carbon emissions for 200 years. Specifically, the US military is the world's largest institutional consumer of oil, of fossil fuels. It is the world's largest institutional emitter of carbon dioxide. I'm going to read here from a report in Mother Jones that cites a political scientist at Oxford University, Netta Crawford, who pointed out that the U.S. Department of Defense, that is the Pentagon, is the single largest institutional fossil fuel user in the world.
Yeah, Frankster, same with me.
The U.S. military has been responsible
I think about
for
that stat every time someone from Canada tries to lecture China about what they should and shouldn't do. Whether it's one of these like Maoists or whether it's a reactionary, you know. But I repeat myself. No, I think about that every time, though. It's really an amazing stat. That's the colonial mentality when we think that we can like lecture them about what they should and shouldn't do. When the party members completely dwarf our entire national population, to say nothing of the number of Chinese people. Incredible.
77 to 80% of U.S. federal energy consumption. That is 4/5. The Department of Defense maintains more than 560,000 buildings on about 500 bases around the world. That is according to certain official data that they're citing. In reality, other studies have shown that the U.S. military has around 800 foreign military bases. But the point is that we're talking about over 500,000 buildings that they, of course, have air conditioning in. And furthermore, the article also adds that like a Goliath multinational corporation, the U.S. military relies on an extensive network of fossil-fueled ships, trucks, planes, and other vehicles to support its operations, from dropping bombs to delivering humanitarian aid, all of which makes the military a key contributor to climate change and one of the largest polluters in human history. So this is peak hypocrisy. It is the wealthy imperialist countries concentrated in the global north that have a historic debt to the rest of the world, to the global south, to carry out reforms and implement renewable energy policies and reduce their carbon emissions because they became rich through war, through colonialism, through exploitation of fossil fuels. And yet now they're lecturing countries in the global south that want to develop economically and saying that they have an equal responsibility to fight climate change. Now, this is ridiculous. And this is why many countries in the global south are demanding climate reparations. They recognize the need to fight climate change. Climate change is a very real threat. We see it everywhere we look with more and more extreme weather, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, very hot weather, droughts. This is affecting everyone around the world, but in particular, by the way, it is affecting the global south countries that were colonized by the wealthy colonial countries, imperialist countries in the global north. And yet those countries in the north are lecturing in relatively underdeveloped countries in the global south, telling them that they have an equal responsibility. No, this is not how the transition toward renewable energy should work. A clear example of this hypocrisy and arrogance could be seen this July in an interview done by the top U.S. national security official, Jake Sullivan. He is President Biden's national security advisor.
The friendship triangle.
Oh man, Jameson, thank you so much for 5 gifted subs. Very kind of you, Jameson. Thank you. Thanks for bailing me out. It's been a slow day over here. It's been a slow, lazy Saturday over here. And Jameson comes through with a very, very helpful and much needed 5 gifted subs. Thank you, Jameson. Waza. I do remember that. Yeah. Classic. Thanks again, Jameson. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And he went on to CNN in an interview with the CNN host Jake Tapper, and he wagged his finger at China and complained that China supposedly isn't doing enough to fight climate change, despite the fact that China is leading the world in the fight against climate change. Here is this incredibly hypocritical clip.
China is on track to become the world's worst all-time polluter.
Jake Tapper's imperialist dog
allows China to maintain higher emissions because they categorize them as a developing nation. Now, the House of Representatives voted 415 to 0 to reverse that.
Start building all your plastic shit again.
Isn't it time for the UN to stop allowing China to categorize itself as a developing nation when it comes to
imperialist running dog, Jake Tapper? What a huge piece of shit. Just manufacture all your own shit. I think China should just cut them off from all the nonstop supply of like shit that they produce for us. What does VJ say? That our buckets, our nuts and bolts, all that shit. Yeah, sure. China can just close down those factories and we'll see how America reacts. China needs to help us develop. Yeah, absolutely. Tapper the crapper, more like. Absolutely, definitely.
to climate change?
Well, actually, Jake, the Paris Climate Agreement, which was agreed back in 2015 and which we have rejoined in the Biden administration, actually lays out that every country, including China, has a responsibility to reduce emissions. And the world, I do believe, should step up and encourage, indeed pressure China to take far more dramatic action to reduce emissions. They should not be able to hide behind any kind of claim that they are a developing nation, to step up to their responsibility. And their responsibility under the Paris Climate Accord is to take significant, substantial action to reduce emissions on a defined time frame in the near term. And there is more work for them to do on that front. And Secretary Kerry will make that point when he's in Beijing.
There are so many ludicrous things that the U.S. National Security Advisor said there that I'm going to respond to. I'm going to pick apart and fact check. First, I just want to start with his remark that China can't hide behind the fact, the claim he said, that China is
a developing nation,
as if China is not developing. China absolutely is a developing nation. And China was partially colonized by numerous powers, not only Japan, including by the United States, by the way, over the century of humiliation that ended with the revolution in 1949. Let's not forget, as recently as 1900, which was not that long ago, the U.S. was part of the so-called 8-nation alliance that invaded China and militarily occupied the capital, Beijing. There are photos from 1900, 1901 of U.S. soldiers, British soldiers, Japanese soldiers, Tsarist Russian soldiers, other European soldiers, militarily occupying the Chinese capital. The United States was part of that. And then the U.S. was part of the imposition of an unequal treaty on China that forced the Chinese government to pay war reparations to the foreign imperial powers that invaded it, that were larger than the entire tax revenue in China at the time. So the US lecturing China about not being a developing nation is completely preposterous, considering the role of the US in invading China, imposing unequal treaties on it, trying to forcibly open its markets to...
I mean, even with the advancement that China's been on over the last couple of decades, like still very much a deeply impoverished country. Even with all the development, all the infrastructure that's been built, the poverty reduction programs, still deeply impoverished. Country of 1.6 billion people. The idea that it's not developing is just totally preposterous.
U.S. corporations. I mean, it's just, again, peak hypocrisy. But that's easy enough to point out. I also want to respond to his claim that China supposedly is not doing enough to fight climate change. I mean, this is in some ways even more outrageous. China is doing the most out of any country on earth to fight climate change and move toward renewable energy. When you consider the size of its population, the investments that it's making in renewable energy infrastructure, China
which includes
is
rail,
leading the world, and the United States is basically doing nothing in comparison to Beijing. I just want to start looking at an incredible graph here that was published by the Financial Times. And this just illustrates how nonsensical it is for the United States to accuse China of not doing enough to fight climate change and reduce its carbon emissions. This graph shows world investment in clean energy manufacturing. And we can see that since 2018, for 5 years, China has represented around 80% of the entire...
Axel Sinhuber, Patreon sub. Thank you for that. Although sometimes I never know where to say thank you when I get those Patreon alerts, because sometimes when someone like readjusts their thing down, it sends an alert. But I appreciate that. I should do more stuff with Patreon. I just have a Patreon which I don't post anything on, which I just have in case people just want to support the work that I do. I do a number of things. I have a podcast, I do the stream, I do writing and social media stuff, TikTok, whatever. It's just a kind of catch-all place where people can support that. I really should start trying to promote that, or to actually have content on there that, would provide people an incentive. But anyone that does pledge on Patreon as well, also very, very helpful.
World's clean energy manufacturing investment. It is varied a little bit by year, but as of 2022, it was nearly 90% of the world's entire clean energy manufacturing investment.
Prevmark, thanks for the Patreon sub as well.
The little red box representing less than 10%. And by the way, it's not
That's
just
a good
the US,
alert.
it's also
I don't hear
Canada.
that one enough.
It's North America. So the US criticizing China for supposedly not doing enough to reduce carbon emissions is like the world's worst arsonist telling their neighbor that they need to work on fighting fires. I mean, it is completely just out of touch, delusional. And I'm going to look at two other graphs here that show just how insane Washington is for these accusations against Beijing. This first graph shows all of the solar panel capacity in the entire world that has been installed. And altogether, all of the solar panels, which are known formally as photovoltaic cells, they're known as PV often in short. If you look at a graph of all of the solar panels installed in the world, it represents around 1,200 gigawatts. Just China represents 1/3 of the world's entire installed solar panel capacity, 462 out of the 1,200. That means that China has more solar panel energy capacity installed than the US, Japan, India, Germany, Australia, Spain, and South Korea combined. If you combine all of the solar panels installed in those countries, China still has more.
China.
And by the way, that is only looking at all of the solar panels
Jake
that have
Tapper
been installed
that
in
crab
history.
boobs.
If you look at what China is installing per year, no country comes even remotely close. A similar graph that is also from the NREL, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, shows the deployment per year, that is the installation of PV photovoltaic cells, solar panels. And we can see that in 2022, China installed nearly 100 gigawatts out of the entire world's installation of 230. So China represented close to half of the world's entire installation of solar power capacity. China installed roughly 5 times as much solar panel capacity in 2022 as the US did.
China's
and yet
become the
Washington
number one
is lecturing
EV
Beijing about supposedly not doing enough. This is a report in the
exporter as
renewable
well.
energy industry focused website Clean Technica that notes that in 2022, 44%
Jesus,
of
Jameson.
all of the new electricity capacity installed
More
in
like
China.
Jake Crapper. Now listen, Jameson, you know I respect you. All right? You know I do. This is a family show. It's a family stream. And we do try to dial down the rhetoric a little bit. There's a lot of polarization out there. And, you know, we might have strong personal feelings about these things. But when you come out here with that kind of really strong language like that, I think it's a little disturbing. And I think we got to tone that down. I do appreciate the support, Jameson. I really do. Let's try to remember the optics. Let's try to remember to be civil. We like to attack people only with facts, okay? When they go low, we go high. That's what we say on here. So I would just like to keep that in mind. It's potentially alienating to potential allies. Exactly. It really turns people off. So let's make sure we're paying attention to that. All right. That's all.
China came from solar power. China was responsible for 42% of all of the solar power capacity installed
what if Jake
in the entire
Crapper's
world
family was watching
in 2022. Moreover,
How would that make them feel?
All of the solar power capacity and the wind power capacity installed in China in 2022, it represented roughly 2/3, 64% of all new electricity capacity. This is the seventh year in a row that solar and wind have combined to lead China in new power capacity additions. And at the same time, by the way, coal and fossil gas had their worst result in more than a decade. Now, among critics of China, it's common to hear them criticize China's use of fossil fuels and coal. And it is true that China does still use coal, although the reality is that over time, it's going to decrease the amount of fossil fuels and replace those with renewable energy. China is still a developing country. Despite Jake Sullivan's insistence to the contrary, China is still developing, and many countries in the global south are simply trying to provide electricity to poor people in rural areas. China has had a massive poverty reduction campaign to lift 800 million people out of poverty. And part of that includes providing electricity, water, clean potable water, healthcare services, education. A lot of people in the global north don't even think about that because they're living in developed countries that developed through war and slavery and exploitation and imperialism and colonialism. Whereas many people in the global south, a lot of poor people, especially in Latin America and in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, don't have access to electricity or clean water. So obviously, if the country is trying to simply get out of poverty and develop, it's going to try to use any form it can to do that. But China is, as it develops, also moving toward renewable energy at a breakneck speed that no other country on earth comes even remotely close to, including the United States, which is criticizing China for supposedly not doing enough. Again, the hypocrisy is ridiculous. Here's a report from Bloomberg in May 2023. China's solar boom is already accelerating past last year's record surge. It notes China's solar sector is accelerating an already world-beating pace of installations. I want to repeat that. World-beating pace of installations. China installed almost 3 times the volume of solar capacity in the first 4 months of this year than it did in the same period in 2022. It is on track to add more solar panels this year in China than the entire total in all of the United States ever installed in history. I want to repeat that for emphasis here. China is on the path this year in 2023 to install more solar panel capacity than the United States has ever installed in its entire history in all parts of the US. And yet, US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has the gall to accuse China of supposedly not doing enough to fight climate change and reduce its carbon emissions. Again, it is like the worst arsonist in the world accusing his neighbor of not doing enough to fight forest fires. I mean, going back to this Bloomberg article, there's a graph here that shows how in the past 3 years, well, 2 years, 2021, 22, and this year, 2023, China has continued to break its record by installing more and more solar panels. And the article estimates that China could install 154 gigawatts of solar capacity in 2023. The US, in all of the country, in all of its history, has only ever installed 144 gigawatts. And by the way, it's estimated that China next year could install 200 to 300 gigawatts of solar capacity. That means that next year, according to this report...
was it the Reagan administration tearing the solar panels off the White House? Something like that?
Bloomberg, China may install twice as many solar panels in 1 year than the US has ever installed in its history. I mean, the pace of China's transition to renewable energies is absolutely incredible. No country on earth comes even remotely close. Reuters reported this June that China's installed non-fossil fuel electricity capacity now is the majority of its electricity capacity. It is over 50%. I'm going to read here from Reuters. China's non-fossil fuel energy sources now exceed 50% of its total installed electricity generation capacity. Non-fossil fuel power sources such as wind and solar power account for 50.9%, 51% of the country's total installed capacity. And by the way, China's goal that it established in 2021 was to meet this target by 2025, and it accomplished it 2 years early. So not only does China have government plans for its economy, it actually, in many cases, meets those plans early. Meanwhile, in the United States, they can't even replace the thousands of bridges that are at danger of breaking, of falling apart under people's
Didn't
cars.
they just pledge like 20 million?
The way the Wall Street Journal put it is China is undergoing a green
like 7
revolution,
bridges, something like that?
and it is quietly succeeding. I should point out, the Wall Street Journal is in no way sympathetic to China. It's very critical of China, and yet they acknowledged in this report that China, this is from June of this year, China added 62 gigawatts of solar and wind power capacity in the first 4 months of this year. In comparison, the country added only around 26 gigawatts during the same period in 2022. So that's 2 times more than last year.
How many did Canada and the United States do?
China's solar capacity has risen by 44% since the end of 2021. China is already a massive hydropower power generator as well. So the total...
Yeah, Dak, it must be. I would be curious to know the definitive answer to that, but I would be surprised if it was not state-owned, though.
Renewable percentage will likely be even higher because hydro is often not included in these statistics. Instead, they look at solar and wind. I mean, if you just look at a graph of China's installed renewable capacity from wind and solar, it just keeps growing more and more every single year. But what's funny about this article is that the Wall Street Journal complains that while China is helping to save the world, foreign capitalist investors can't make money off of it because it's being driven by the state, by state-led investment. The Wall Street Journal wrote, quote, China's immense renewable build-out is good news for the planet, but so far it has proven tougher to make money from Chinese renewable stocks. For investors, the best play might be to stand by and watch the show. So China is saving the planet. It is leading the world in renewable energy technology infrastructure with 80% of the world's investment. But because foreign capitalist
Imagine being a China bad leftist.
The Wall Street Journal is telling you, just forget about it. It's not important because,
couldn't be me.
It's all the Chinese government that's doing it. How sad. Socialism.
But
it's
at what
saving the world
cost?
from climate change. Very, very sad. You can't profit from it. And speaking of Western corporations not being able to profit, the Financial Times published a column that is titled China's Dominance of Solar Poses Difficult Choices for the West. And basically, the article points out that a lot of Western governments love to claim that they care about climate change and care about renewable energy. The US constantly says that, but in reality, it's China that puts its money where its mouth is, and the Western governments are actually not doing that much to fight climate change. It's purely rhetorical, and if you look at the renewable energy industry, it is almost entirely controlled by China. If you look at all of the parts that go into creating solar panels, China represents the vast majority in most of the solar industry, including the vast majority of the modules, the cells, the wafers, the polysilicon. In fact, China represents nearly 100% of the world's wafer manufacturing and over 80% of the cells manufacturing. And the US has been imposing sanctions and tariffs on Chinese solar panel makers and other Chinese tech companies. So China, once again, is leading the world in renewable energy technology, leading the world in fighting climate change. The US is not really doing that much, and yet it's constantly criticizing China and claiming to be leading the world. I mean, once again, you have to look past the cynical greenwashing rhetoric of Western governments to see. In fact, when you look past that
the whole
cynical
Biden
rhetoric,
administration,
you can actually see that
infrastructure bill that they passed, which was, as they keep telling us, like the most ambitious climate agenda ever passed in the U.S. government. And maybe that's true. It's a really low bar, but like, what's actually on there? You do have to go beyond the rhetoric and investigate the actual investments that are going on and the actual tangible steps that they're taking, which just is pathetic and completely worthless in comparison to the very real steps that China is taking.
the Biden administration, which, Donald Trump is a climate science denier, and basically the entire Republican Party in the US denies climate science. I mean, they are like knuckle dragging primates. I mean, they are trying to destroy the entire planet. They don't believe in basic science that everyone around the world recognizes. And yet the Democrats, they say they recognize the science, and yet they do nothing significant to challenge the big US fossil fuel corporations that are destroying the planet, and of course are also donating a lot of money to their political campaigns, which is one of the main reasons. This is a report from the Center for Biological Diversity, and it shows that, in fact, the Biden administration has been giving out more oil and gas drilling approval permits than Trump did. I'm reading from this. Federal data show the Biden administration approved 6,430 permits for oil and gas drilling on public lands in the first 2 years, outpacing the Trump administration's 6,172 drilling permit approvals in its first 2 years. So Biden is actually breaking his promise that he said he's not going to give oil and gas drilling permits on public lands, and he's doing it even worse than Trump. And the article, this press release notes that, quote, the Biden administration.
You see a lot about that, the Biden administration, like, complaining about Trump policies and then like carry on these exact same policies. It's happened in immigration as well, which I think makes it all the more, I think, sad and cynical when people like AOC or people in the squad are like, he's doing a great job. He's doing a great job. It's like they organize specifically around climate, specifically around immigration. And when the Biden administration carries over the exact same reactionary Trump policies, they're like, this doesn't look like anything to me. I don't know. Kind of sad.
Fossil fuel expansion contradicts the clear climate science that fossil fuel growth must be stopped and governments must phase out fossil fuels to avoid the most catastrophic consequences of climate change. However, I would add that it's specifically the wealthy imperialist countries in the global north that already developed. Telling global south countries they have to do it is not fair because they have not been able to develop. There is a burden on the global north. They need to pay climate reparations so poor countries can develop. But again, the
our media is owned by the military-industrial complex and the fossil fuel companies
for not believing in basic science as the world is cooking around us and they're risking killing billions of people. And this is an important point. It's not going to be the rich people in the global north that suffer the worst catastrophic effects of climate change. They can pay to move to Australia or Antarctica or wherever, or Alaska. It's going to be poor people in the global south that already are bearing the brunt of the extreme.
You think the refugee crisis is bad now?
Including typhoons, hurricanes, tornadoes.
And look at how the refugee crisis is fueling fascism in Europe right now and in the United States. The migrant caravans that we're seeing now, the huge migrant caravans resulting from like imperialism and the war on terror, which are these people are just being dehumanized, we're celebrating as they drown in the fucking ocean. They're being put into concentration camps. Pales in comparison. It's nothing like what we're going to see over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It's genuinely horrifying to think about what that's going to look like.
Floods, and it's very easy to explain why. I mean, a lot of poor people in the global south, they live in shanty towns. They live in houses that are made of, basically, spare parts of, spare pieces of metal and spare pieces of wood. It is not very well done, architecture. It is not safe housing. So when there is an earthquake in a place like Haiti, thousands and thousands of people die. This is also what happened in Turkey. There were a lot of low quality housing that was not manufactured at a high level, that was done very cheaply, and it all collapsed because of the earthquake.
Yeah, DeSantis is talking about drone striking, and that's now.
As class quakes, because if the same intensity earthquake happens in a rich country that developed through imperialism and has much better infrastructure.
Yeah, there's floating concentration camps now. There's like migrant, like prison islands off Australia now. There's concentration camps on the southern United States border right now, which also Biden has continued and contributed to. And it's nothing like what we're going to see. Nothing. Nowhere near the scope of what we're going to see because of these climate refugees.
Many people are going to die. So the point is, once again, there is a burden on the wealthy imperialist countries in the global north that are not doing that much to fight climate change, and yet they lecture countries like China and the global south, which are leading the world in the fight against climate change. I mean, I've made my point again and again here. I just really wanted to stress that The wealthy capitalist countries in the global north that developed through imperialism have a debt, a climate debt to the global south, and they owe the global south reparations if they actually do want to fight climate change, if they do want to make this planet livable.
We do not.
And let's see them put their money where their mouth is. Instead, they prefer lecturing their adversaries for supposedly not doing enough. Well, the U.S. continues to wage war around the world. The U.S. military being the world's largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases, of carbon dioxide, the largest consumer of fossil fuels. I mean, again, as I began this analysis saying today, the United States is the most hypocritical nation on earth. With that, I'm going to conclude. I'm Ben Norton. This is Geopolitical.
Thank you. That was great. That was another great video from Ben in Geopolitical Economy Report, a friend of the stream, former guest. I'm going to have him back at some point. Please support Ben's work and check out the video there. Great, wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. And, he made a lot of important points. But I do believe in hearing different sides of the equation and presenting like an unbiased viewpoint. So, I think we got to look at the other side of that as well. So let's just take a brief moment to do that also. Whoa, that was too fast. I was not able to, okay.
Trouble if he succeeds. Kremlin says there's a prophecy where the men leave the tunnels if they can't feed. Joe Biden, I'm begging, please. There are so many other foods that you can't eat. Kremlin says there'll be hell unleashed if the men in the tunnels don't get their meat. Kremlin says there'll be hell unleashed if the men in the tunnels don't get their meat. Kremlin says there will be hell unleashed if the men in the tunnels come up to feed.
Are you worried that Joe Biden is going to come into your home and eat all of your meat? I can help.
Man, that's fantastic. Never gets old. I remember when Jake Let's Go released that one. It's not often that I do this, but I sent him a DM, and because I love that riff so much. That guitar riff is just so great. I really do love it. Another former guest of the show, or Second Thought, Ben Norton, and Nick Let's Go. 3 videos back to back to back. All friends of the show. All friends of the stream. All personal friends of me, Rob. Anyway, I gotta go, folks. I gotta go pick up my kid. I'm at one final time, and I am genuinely sorry. I am genuinely sorry for this. One final time. I'm at 15 out of 35 subs, going on 4.5 hours here, this stream. I think it's been a fantastic stream. I have enjoyed it a lot. It's been fun and productive and cool. But if any more brave heroes want to step up and support this channel and help me make my number go up a little tiny bit more, please, folks, if you can, subscribe to TRRS. It's Twitch's only 2-dimensional triangle-shaped friendship access and trickle-down clout tiered reward system. And the only way that this show
You've just
stays
become an
on the
elite
air.
member of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh my goodness. Jameson's just bailing out everybody today. Probably feels bad for that out-of-pocket comment about Jake Tapper earlier, which I admonished him for. Jameson, that's really generous of you. I really appreciate that. Seriously, thank you. That's very, very kind of you. We got Vexing Thoughts as well, asking for a possible gifted sub. Just wants to get his son some meat. My son actually loves that song. He really loves that song. He requests it often, actually. He really likes it. So, folks, do any other brave heroes want to step up? How old is my kid? He's 7. He's 7. I almost didn't remember for a moment there. I got it though. I fly off the handle sometimes, and I appreciate the tone and candor of this triangle-based community you've built, Jameson. Thank you. You're a very kind and generous person. Anyone else? Any other takers? Again, we got Vexing Thoughts begging for a gifted sub. Is a generous chatter going to come through for Vexing Thoughts? Isn't that the age where you can really start cramming them full of information? It depends. He's definitely getting crammed full of information. It's often not me that's doing I contribute to it, but he's governed by the things that he's interested in, though. So you can't just force them to be interested in things that only you care about. You know? He really wants to be crammed full of information about like different voice actors and the different voice acting things that they do and different roles that they have. That's the main thing that he wants to learn about. His favorite voice, his favorite voice actor, Jameson, is this guy Jeff Bergman.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Crad Babes, thank you very much for gifting a sub to Vexing Thoughts. Thank you, Crad Babes. My kid is the only 7-year-old in the world he's the biggest fan of this guy Jeff Bergman, he's the modern voice actor of Bugs Bunny. He's the only 7-year-old in the world that's like a big Jeff Bergman fan. We did actually, Jameson, the other day we went to Comic-Con a couple weeks ago, and he met John DiMaggio, he's the voice of like Bender on Futurama and Jake the Dog on Adventure Time, and has done some other stuff and was in a Batman movie that he liked. And we went to Comic-Con and met him, and he was like so happy, and he got his selfie with him and everything. Let's see, actually, I'll just, before I sign off, I'll show you. It's actually very adorable. It's very adorable. When was that? It was a couple weeks ago. Yeah, here. This is so sweet. Look at this. Look how happy he is. He was so happy. He's a funny guy. Very funny dude. Okay, I gotta go. You know, it would have been nice to make to the sub goal, but I guess you can't freak out over it, can you? I'm telling this more to myself than like anyone else. But I do really appreciate everyone that hung out today. I know it's a slow day. It's a Saturday. People are busy doing other stuff, and I really appreciate everyone that came and hang out today. It was really fun. You could freak out over it. I agree. I could, but I choose not to. Like I've said many times, I do really try to be grateful for how generous everyone in this community is and how supportive people are, because I really do appreciate it, and I don't ever want to come across like I don't profoundly appreciate that, because I really, really do. I feel very, very lucky just to make a small living from doing this show. I think it's really, really cool that I get to do that, and you folks are the reason why. So I don't ever want to lose sight of that. So thanks again, friends. I'll be back on Monday. All right. I'll be back on Monday. We got another week of long streams, at least until next Thursday. So get ready for that. And like I said, I'll try to do at least one mega stream next week. I'll try to do at least one. I'll try to do one next week that gets into this 8-9 hour territory, because I'm a sicko. I'm a fucking sicko, and I like that kind of stuff. Even though it's mentally and physically taxing to sit here all day on these things. I'm a sick man, a sick individual. Give my regards to our friend Stu, and I'll see you folks on Monday. Peace.